The Mystery of the Yellow Room by Gaston Leroux. Dramatized by Stephen Sheridan.
Damnation. Mathilde, where are you?
I was just closing the shutters in the Yellow Room.
I don't seem able to locate my pen.
It's in your breast pocket, Father.
Oh, yes.
Can't you wait until morning to write up the results of your experiment?
I'm much too excited for that. I honestly believe I'm on the verge of a breakthrough.
Oh. Father?
What is it?
I thought I saw someone pass by the window.
I expect it was Monsieur Corbeau. He often patrols the grounds at this hour, looking for poachers.
Monsieur Corbeau, yes, of course.
Are you all right, Mathilde? You've been jumping at shadows all evening.
I expect I'm just a little overtired.
A few hours' sleep will soon remedy that. Why don't you return to the house?
There's a perfectly good bed in the Yellow Room. I'd rather spend the night in there.
Are you sure that nothing's the matter?
Quite sure, Father. I just don't want to be on my own. I'll sleep much more soundly knowing that we're only separated by a single door.
As you wish, my child. I'll bid you good night, then.
Good night, Father. And, Father...
Yes, child?
It doesn't matter. Good night.
I need a glass of brandy, Jacques. I'm chilled to the bone.
You can't have finished patrolling the grounds already. You've only been gone 10 minutes.
Yeah, we can't all be as industrious as your precious professor.
I'll thank you to show a little more respect when you talk of the master.
Oh, he's still slaving away now down in the old pavilion. He spends more time in his laboratory than he does in his own house.
He simply enjoys hard work, Monsieur Corbeau. It's a pity you're not the same. You might actually manage to catch a poacher once in a while.
These findings further refute the widely held notion that matter can neither be created nor destroyed. Who is it?
I'm sorry to disturb you, sir. I wondered if you'd be requiring anything further before I turn in.
No, thank you, Jacques.
And Mademoiselle Stangerson? Mademoiselle Stangerson, sir.
She won't be requiring anything either. She's sleeping next door in the Yellow Room. Oh, Mathilde!
Father, save me!
Mathilde! Mathilde! Open the door!
She must have bolted it from the inside.
Well, we'll have to break it down. Run to the house. Fetch Corbeau! Hurry, man! Hurry! Again! Yeah! Well done, Corbeau.
Mademoiselle Stangerson!
Is she? No, she's still breathing.
Oh, thank God.
Quickly, man, your handkerchief. I want to staunch the wound on her head.
Look at her throat. Somebody's tried to strangle her.
Who can have done such a terrible thing?
Who indeed? And more to the point, how did he escape from the room?
He certainly couldn't have passed through a bolted door.
No. And he didn't use the window either. But the iron bars outside haven't been touched.
I don't understand, Professor Stangerson. It makes no sense. Whoever attacked your daughter has vanished into thin air.
My involvement in the mystery of the Yellow Room began on a clear autumn morning in 1896. I was eating breakfast at my lodgings when the door was suddenly flung open by my old friend, Joseph Rouletabille.
Saint-Clair!
What on...
Have you seen the newspaper?
No.
Look, right here.
Although not yet 30, Rouletabille was already the most celebrated journalist in Paris. Like everyone else, he was fascinated by what had occurred at Chateau Stangerson, and he read out the facts of the case with the utmost relish.
It really is a most remarkable business, is it not?
No. I can't make head nor tail of it. The door was bolted, the window was barred, yet somehow Mademoiselle Stangerson's attacker managed to escape from the room.
I'd give 1,000 francs to know how it was done.
I'd give 1,000 francs for a breath of fresh air.
Oh, I'm sorry, Saint-Clair. Is my cigarette smoke bothering you?
No more than usual. I'll open a window.
According to the newspaper, the attacker left behind 2 clues. A blood-stained handprint on the yellow wallpaper and a revolver from which 2 shots had been fired.
A revolver?
Apparently it belonged to old Jacques, the Stangerson servant.
Well, I trust he's been arrested. He's clearly an accomplice.
I'm sure you're an excellent barrister, Saint-Clair, but I hope you never become a judge. You're willing to convict on the flimsiest evidence.
Well, you believe him to be innocent, then?
I'd stake my grandmother's life on it.
Well, I thought your grandmother died last Easter.
That was just a story I made up to avoid accompanying you to the opera.
Oh, really, Rouletabille?
Now, my editor wants me to visit the chateau and see what I can discover. I was hoping I might persuade you to come with me.
Oh?
Robert Darzac will be there. You can renew your friendship.
I'd hardly describe Mademoiselle Stangerson's fiancé as a friend. I represented him once in a civil action.
It's vital I interview him. If you're with me, he'll doubtless be more willing to talk.
Well, I'm a little reluctant to abandon my practice at such short notice. But you'll obviously make no progress without me.
Excellent. We'll set off at once.
Can I at least finish my breakfast?
I wouldn't recommend it. I've just stubbed out my cigarette on your plate.
Oh, for pity's sake.
Epinay is the nearest station to the Stangerson estate. Run and fetch your coat, Saint-Clair. The next train leaves in 15 minutes.
What can you tell me about Robert Darzac?
Well, he's a gentleman of the very highest character. Like his future father-in-law, he has dedicated his life to the study of science.
He's a professor at the Sorbonne, I believe.
Quite so.
According to the newspaper, he was delivering a lecture when Mademoiselle Stangerson was attacked.
Well, then at least we know he isn't involved in this horrible business.
Can't this train go any faster?
But don't put your head out of the window, you'll get it knocked off.
If there's one thing I can't abide, it's indolence. Whilst we're sitting here, the police are no doubt trampling over vital evidence.
Do we know who the presiding magistrate has appointed to investigate the case?
Oh, yes, he's placed the matter in the hands of Frederic Larsan.
Ah, the great Inspector Larsan. At last, a foeman worthy of your mettle.
I'm sure I don't know what you mean.
Oh, come along, Rouletabille. Everybody knows that you pride yourself on solving mysteries before the police.
Only one thing concerns me, Saint-Clair, and that's establishing the truth. Making the police look incompetent is just an agreeable bonus.
And you'll have your work cut out finding the man who shot at Mademoiselle Stangerson. He must be cunning as a fox.
What makes you think that Mademoiselle Stangerson was shot at?
I beg your pardon?
I think we'll discover that it was she who fired the revolver.
Oh, but the wound on her forehead, surely that was caused by a bullet grazing her temple.
Consider the facts. Mademoiselle Stangerson was clearly frightened of something.
She must have been. Why else would she lock herself in for the night?
It's my belief that she also borrowed old Jacques' revolver for additional protection.
I think I follow your reasoning. You believe that she shot at her assassin in self-defense, wounding him in the hand.
Well done, Saint-Clair. We'll make a reporter of you yet.
Your theory would certainly explain the blood-stained handprint on the wallpaper. But if Mademoiselle Stangerson wasn't grazed by a bullet, what caused the wound to her temple?
That, my dear Saint-Clair, is what we have to find out. Speaking for myself, I can't wait to get started.
The closer we drew to Épinay, the more excited Rouletabille became. When we arrived at the station, he leapt from the train and beckoned to a porter.
Excuse me, my good man. Can you direct us to Chateau Stangerson?
Certainly, sir. If you head north on the main road, you can't miss it.
Ah, well, you've been extremely helpful. Saint-Clair will give you something for your trouble.
Well, I have to warn you, sir. It's a good hour's walk.
An hour's walk?
Excellent. There's nothing like a little exercise to stimulate the mind.
You don't know where we could hire a cab?
Saint-Clair?
All right, I'm coming. As it turned out, Chateau Stangerson was even further from the station than we'd been led to believe, and it took us almost 90 minutes to reach its gates. When we finally arrived, we discovered Inspector Larsan conducting a minute examination of the grounds.
Larsan, good morning.
Well, well, well. Joseph Rouletabille, what brings you here, as if I need ask?
We've come to speak with Robert Darzac.
I'm sorry, Rouletabille. Monsieur Darzac has left strict instructions that he's not to be disturbed.
But Saint-Clair is one of his oldest friends. Aren't you, Saint-Clair?
Well, I'm going to continue my investigations over by the lake. Oh, if you want to speak with Robert Darzac, now's your chance. He's coming straight towards you.
Monsieur Darzac was sitting at the reins of a horse and trap, his face haggard and pale. He scarcely seemed aware of our presence, until suddenly Rouletabille stepped into his path.
Whoa! Have you taken leave of your senses? You might have been killed.
Allow me to introduce myself, Monsieur Darzac. I am Joseph Rouletabille. Saint-Clair, I believe you already know.
Yes, of course. You once acted for me.
How's your fiancée, Monsieur Darzac?
She'll live, thank God.
I can see you're in a hurry, but it's vital we talk.
I'm sorry, Monsieur Rouletabille. It's out of the question. I'm expected back in Paris, and I dare not...
How pleasant was the vicarage, and how colourful its gardens.
What did you say?
I think you heard, monsieur.
I don't understand. How could you possibly know about that?
A moment of your time, that's all I ask.
You'd better go and wait inside the house. I'll join you there immediately.
Rouletabille, that phrase about the vicarage, what does it mean?
Well, later, Saint-Clair, later.
Very well, Monsieur Rouletabille. What do you want?
I want to shake your hand.
I beg your pardon?
Your hand, monsieur. I want to shake it.
As you're a friend of Monsieur Saint-Clair, I see no reason to refuse.
No, forgive me, but I'd prefer it if you first removed your gloves.
So, that's what you're about, is it? Very well, then.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, monsieur.
I trust you're satisfied. As you can see, neither of my hands show any sign of injury.
Oh, dear Saint-Clair, Monsieur Darzac has clearly decided that I'm an insolent young pup.
He's like that, I'm afraid. A good judge of character.
Perhaps you'd be kind enough to wait outside for a moment.
Ah.
I have something to tell him that may change his mind.
After Rouletabille's extraordinary display of bad manners, I fully expected Robert Darzac to ask us to leave. When, however, the two men emerged from the house some 10 minutes later, they were both behaving like the closest of friends.
Excellent news, Saint-Clair. Monsieur Darzac has decided to postpone his journey to Paris.
Oh?
Monsieur Rouletabille has persuaded me that he may be of some use in this matter.
I'm extremely relieved to hear it, but surely...
Come along, Saint-Clair.
Where now?
We're off to the old pavilion. Monsieur Darzac has agreed to show us the Yellow Room.
Here we are, gentlemen. I'll open the shutters.
Why does Professor Stangerson have a bedroom adjoining his laboratory?
He sometimes works for up to 72 hours at a time. He comes in here when he needs a little rest.
What is the nature of his research, Monsieur Darzac?
I'm afraid it's a little technical to explain to a layman.
Well, you better not bother then. It took me 18 months to master long division.
What are these gentlemen doing in here?
You needn't concern yourself, Jacques. They're with me.
The carpet under the bed. It's been moved.
Oh, we did that, sir. When we couldn't find the attacker, we started looking for tunnels.
But there weren't any, were there? What's above this room?
Oh, an attic, sir. But it can only be reached from the professor's laboratory.
I confess I'm still as baffled as ever. The attacker must have escaped through the door.
It's impossible, sir. Professor Stangerson was outside the whole time.
He certainly didn't get out through the window. These iron bars must be an inch thick.
I'd give anything to meet the man behind all this. He deserves a medal for conceiving so ingenious a crime.
Really, Rouletabille, that remark was most ungentlemanly.
No doubt it was. Fortunately, I'm not a gentleman.
Have you spotted something, sir?
There's a bullet lodged in the ceiling.
Well, that's hardly a great discovery, Monsieur Rouletabille. There's another one over by the door.
Hand me that chair, Saint-Clair. I want to take a closer look.
I suppose that if she fired from a prone position, one of Mademoiselle Stangerson's bullets would embed itself in the ceiling?
Quite so. Quite so. Tell me, Jacques, was Mademoiselle Stangerson wearing a high collar before she was attacked?
You must be a sorcerer, sir. How did you know that?
And this little marble-topped table, was it on its side when you broke down the door?
Yes, sir, it was.
I wonder.
Mademoiselle Stangerson must have knocked it over as she was struggling with her attacker.
That's the most likely explanation, certainly.
Do you have another?
There's a little blood and a single hair on one of the corners. What does that tell you?
Absolutely nothing.
Does it not? Does it not? Dear me.
Really, Monsieur Rouletabille, this is intolerable. You're talking in riddles.
You needn't concern yourself, Monsieur Darzac. He often does that.
It's a little stuffy in here. Let's get some fresh air.
Well, don't you want to continue examining the room?
Oh, I've discovered more than enough for one morning. I want to see what old Larsan is up to down by the lake.
Hello, Rouletabille. Are you still here?
I hope you'll forgive me, Inspector, but I've asked him to stay.
I shall be glad of his advice. I hold Monsieur Rouletabille in the very highest regard.
Your reputation for shrewdness is clearly deserved. Tell me, what have you found?
What makes you think he's found anything?
Oh, use your intelligence, Saint-Clair. Why else would he have spent so long in the same place?
As a matter of fact, I have made a discovery. It rained yesterday afternoon, and the path around here is quite muddy.
Footprints!
And they can't be more than 12 hours old. They lead directly from the old pavilion.
You've done very well, Larsan. Very well.
Thank you, Rouletabille.
These prints were made by an expensive, rather elegant boot. That suggests that the attacker is a man of some means.
My thoughts exactly. Furthermore, I'm of the opinion...
What is it, Inspector?
It's the most extraordinary thing, Monsieur Darzac. Look at the footprints made by the attacker, and look at the ones you've made now.
Good Lord. They're identical.
Just a minute. I hope you're not implying...
Of course not. No, I'm merely commenting on a remarkable coincidence.
Oh, this is monstrous, Inspector. Surely you don't think that Monsieur Darzac attacked his fiancée? He was lecturing at the Sorbonne last night.
Were you, sir?
As a matter of fact, I asked somebody else to deliver my lecture. I was feeling unwell and decided to go for a walk.
Very wise, sir. There's nothing like a breath of fresh air to clear the head.
The footprints are superseded over here with bicycle tracks.
The attacker must have used one to make his getaway.
Do you know if anyone in the vicinity owns such a vehicle?
As Inspector Larson was no doubt about to tell you, I do.
Oh?
Of course, you're obviously innocent, but, well, just to satisfy my curiosity, may I examine it?
No, Inspector, you may not. It was stolen from me several days ago.
Oh, dear me. Another remarkable coincidence. We're amassing quite a collection.
Really, Inspector, this is intolerable. You're in no position to make accusations until you've solved the mystery of the Yellow Room.
I wouldn't worry too much about that, sir. I worked out how it was done some time ago.
You can't have.
I'm sorry if you're disappointed, Rouletabille, but that's the way it is. You can't hope to get the better of the police on every occasion.
Excuse me, sir.
Yes, Jacques. What is it?
The doctor's just left Mademoiselle Stangerson. He says she's well enough to be questioned.
Excellent. Come along then, gentlemen. I don't suppose you'll allow me to interview her on my own.
Rouletabille? What is it? He can't have solved it already, Saint-Clair. He can't have.
Are you sure you're ready to be questioned, Mathilde?
I'm feeling much stronger now. I want to help in any way I can.
Mademoiselle Stangerson was propped up in bed, her face so pale that she could easily have been mistaken for a beautiful ghost. Although remarkably composed after her terrible ordeal, I noticed that she trembled as she answered Inspector Larson's questions.
Your father tells me that you'd seemed agitated for some time before the attack.
It was most unlike her, Inspector.
What can possibly have been causing you so much distress?
I'd been hearing noises outside my bedroom window. And sometimes when I looked out, I saw a man disappearing into the bushes.
Oh, Mathilde, if only you'd said something.
I'm sure anyone would be agitated in such circumstances. What measures did you take to ensure your safety?
I tried to avoid being alone whenever I could. And I borrowed old Jacques' revolver from his room.
Did you hear that, Rouletabille? You're right.
Tell me about the events of last night. You spent the evening helping your father.
Yes. I've worked as his assistant ever since...
Well, ever since what?
It doesn't matter.
Oh, please, tell us, Mademoiselle Stangerson.
Really, Inspector Larson, my daughter has just survived an attempt on her life. Must she now endure the impertinences of a junior reporter?
It's best to indulge him, sir. Monsieur Rouletabille has a remarkable talent for unravelling mysteries.
I doubt if you'll find it very relevant, but I intended to say that I've worked as my father's assistant ever since I returned from America.
I see. Mathilde spent 18 months living in Philadelphia with her aunt. She came home a little over 10 years ago.
Thank you, Monsieur Darzac. That's very interesting.
And now, perhaps we can return to the matter in hand.
By all means.
What time did you retire to the Yellow Room last night?
It was a little after 11. After locking the door and changing into my nightdress, I fell into a deep sleep.
As carefully as you can, tell us what happened next.
Must I, Father?
Hush, child. You're safe now.
I don't know how long I slept, but I was woken by the sounds of somebody moving around in the room. As you can imagine, I was greatly alarmed and called out.
It was a dreadful cry. I'll never forget it.
Suddenly, a man leapt from the shadows and started strangling me. It was dark and I couldn't see his face. I reached for my revolver and, as I fired, he brought a cudgel down on my head.
Oh, Mathilde.
The next thing I remember is Father breaking down the door.
Thank you, Mademoiselle Stangerson. You've been very brave.
Does my daughter's evidence offer you any fresh insights, Inspector?
Yes.
I beg your pardon?
It casts the entire matter in a whole new light.
Two glasses of cider, please.
Very good, sir.
Hello there, gentlemen. Sampling the delights of the local tavern.
Saint-Clair's idea. He considers the day wasted unless he's visited at least one alehouse.
Really, Rouletabille?
Landlord, more beer.
You've had enough.
Yeah, look, I got money.
I don't care. Clear off or I'll have you thrown out.
I wouldn't stay here if you paid me. I hope the devil comes for you during the night.
What an unmannerly brute.
Well, that was Monsieur Corbeau, the Stangersons' gamekeeper.
We came here hoping to meet him.
I wouldn't have told you much. He was most unhelpful when I questioned him earlier.
Your cider, sir.
Thank you.
It seems to me that quite a lot of people are being unhelpful at the moment.
Entirely agree.
Robert Darzac, for instance. I'm sure he knows more than he's saying.
I have a theory about that.
Oh?
You remember I told you that I'd solved the mystery of the Yellow Room?
Remember, Rouletabille's talked of little else.
Well, gentlemen, this is how I think it was done. While Jacques was fetching our friend the gamekeeper, it is my belief that Mademoiselle Stangerson's attacker unlocked the door and walked out.
That's your theory? Well, it makes no sense. Professor Stangerson would have seen him.
Professor Stangerson did see him.
Then why didn't he stop him?
He preferred to let him get away.
But why?
It's perfectly simple, Sainclair. Inspector Larson believes that the attacker was Robert Darzac.
Exactly. Professor Stangerson loves Darzac like a son. It's perfectly feasible that he'd try to protect him rather than risk a scandal.
No, I'm sorry, Inspector Larson, but I am quite unconvinced. Robert Darzac has no reason to try and kill his fiancée.
Oh, you haven't heard, then?
Heard what?
According to the servants, Mademoiselle Stangerson has been considering breaking off her engagement.
Oh.
Apparently, she considers herself too old to start changing her ways.
It is odd that she waited so long to marry. But surely her sudden change of heart wouldn't turn her fiancé into a murderer.
Oh, love can affect men in strange ways, Monsieur Sainclair. Who knows what any of us might do if thwarted?
No. No, I'm sorry, Larson, but your theory is wrong.
Do you have a better one?
Not yet, but my instincts tell me that something entirely different happened in the Yellow Room.
You're a clever man, Monsieur Rouletabille, but you're still very young. When you grow older, you'll discover that the simplest explanations are also the most likely.
Well, that's as may be, but consider the evidence.
Not tonight. It's getting late and I still have much to do.
Yes, of course.
Now, I do hope Rouletabille hasn't offended you with his bluntness. He can sometimes be more direct than is entirely proper.
You needn't worry, sir. I find his candour most refreshing.
Oh, don't forget your walking stick.
Thank you, Rouletabille.
I'm surprised you need a cane. You seem remarkably fit.
Appearances can be deceptive. You may not think it to look at me, but I'm a martyr to gout.
I don't envy Monsieur Darzac. Inspector Larson is working against him with all his might.
You're right, Sainclair. He is. Yet for all Larson's ingenious theorizing, I remain convinced that Robert Darzac is an innocent man.
It was almost midnight before we left the Tower Inn. Rouletabille had said little all evening, preferring instead to sit by the fire, puffing away energetically on an endless supply of cigarettes. As we walked back to Chateau Stangerson, I decided to broach a subject that had been much on my mind.
Oh, slow down, Rouletabille. I want to ask you a question.
Oh?
You remember when we arrived here this morning? You said something to Monsieur Darzac.
How pleasant was the vicarage, and how colourful its gardens.
The poor devil looked frightened half to death. Why does the phrase hold such significance for him?
I have seen Mademoiselle Stangerson once before. It was at a reception at the Élysée Palace. She was there with her father and Monsieur Darzac.
I hope you remembered your manners in such august surroundings.
No, Sainclair. I ate with my fingers and blew my nose on the curtains.
No need to be facetious, Rouletabille.
Mademoiselle Stangerson had a letter with her, which she asked Monsieur Darzac to read. They both seemed agitated by its contents, so when they went into the gardens, I decided to follow.
I'm not sure I entirely approve, but go on.
Mademoiselle Stangerson kept on reading out the phrase about the vicarage over and over again. Monsieur Darzac was much distressed and eventually started to weep.
Good heavens.
When I repeated the phrase this morning, he reacted in just the way I'd anticipated.
I'm not surprised.
He realized that I already knew something about his predicament. And after much discussion, he agreed to let me stay here and help.
Sometimes you amaze me, Rouletabille.
Only sometimes.
You must have a mind like a steel trap to remember us all. What is it?
Look! There's a ladder propped up against Mademoiselle Stangerson's window.
The attacker, he must have returned.
We've got him, Sainclair! We've got him! He shan't escape us this time!
We ran as though pursued by demons, and within moments were outside Mademoiselle Stangerson's bedroom.
Nothing! There's no one here!
He must have heard us coming.
Sainclair, look!
At the end of the darkened corridor, we saw the fleeing figure of a man. With an angry snort, he flung open a door and started running down the servants' staircase.
Quickly, Sainclair! After him!
We didn't know if our quarry was armed, and we didn't care. Our only thought was to lay hands on the creature who'd brought so much misery to the Stangerson household.
Gentlemen!
Imagine then our disappointment when we turned a corner and discovered not the object of our pursuit running downstairs, but Inspector Frederic Larson coming up.
What is it? What's happened?
Have you got him?
Got him? Got who?
The attacker!
He's in the house?
We've just pursued him from Mademoiselle Stangerson's bedroom.
Oh, my God.
You must have seen him.
I saw no one. Perhaps he tricked you and doubled back.
Well, I suppose it is very dark.
He came this way, I tell you.
Calm down, Rouletabille. He can't have got far. We'll organise a search.
We roused the servants, but it was all to no avail. The man who escaped from the Yellow Room had once again eluded us and vanished into thin air.
It seems I owe you an apology, Monsieur Rouletabille. Inspector Larsan tells me that you showed great courage last night.
I only wish I could have done more.
I'm sorry if I've appeared discourteous, but I don't much care for journalists. The Stangerson name means a great deal to me, and I can't bear the thought of it being sullied.
In God's name, what's happened? The house is in uproar.
Brace yourself, Monsieur Darzac. The attacker returned again last night.
Mathilde?
Fortunately, Mademoiselle Stangerson wasn't in her room. She decided to spend the night with her nurses instead.
Why are we being persecuted like this?
We mustn't give in to despair, Darzac. Inspector Larsan may yet still save us.
Inspector Larsan?
He's downstairs in the kitchen interviewing the servants. He asked us to send you to him as soon as you arrived.
No doubt he did.
I'm sure he won't mind if we keep him waiting for a few moments. Let's go for a walk, Monsieur Darzac. We have much to discuss.
Professor Stangerson is fortunate to have such lovely gardens.
This is my favourite part of the house. It was on that bench over there that Mathilde first consented to be my wife.
Tell me, Monsieur Darzac, if I could identify her attacker, would you be pleased?
I'd like to kill him with my bare hands.
That isn't what I asked.
I merely meant...
Yes?
I don't know what I meant.
It's all right, Monsieur Darzac. We understand.
It is not all right, Saint-Clair. Monsieur Darzac is lying to us.
Steady on, Rouletabille.
You know who's behind all this, don't you?
Of course not.
Mademoiselle Stangerson told you. She knows as well.
That's absurd. Why would she protect a man who tried to kill her?
Where were you last night?
Last night?
It's a perfectly simple question.
I'm sorry, Monsieur Rouletabille, but honour prevents me from saying.
Oh, you gentlemen and your codes of honour. I thank God that I'm the son of a tailor.
You must forgive my friend his outburst, but you can't expect him to help you if he doesn't have the facts.
I'm afraid I'm already beyond his help. But it's not too late for Mathilde.
Oh?
I have to go to Paris this evening. Now, don't ask me why. I won't tell you.
And you're worried the attacker will strike again while you're away?
He'll certainly consider it. I'm sure of that. But you may be able to prevent it from happening.
How?
I want you to stand armed guard all night outside Mathilde's bedroom. Make sure that everybody knows what you're planning to do.
Oh, wouldn't it be better if we acted in secret?
No. I want the attack prevented, not the attacker exposed.
Won't you think again and tell us his name?
I'm sorry, Monsieur Rouletabille, but I'd sooner go to the scaffold than do that.
Very well, then. We'll do what you ask.
Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you. And gentlemen...
Yes?
Be very careful. You're not dealing with an ordinary criminal, but the most dangerous man in France.
Old Jacques has managed to unearth a couple of revolvers. They're rather ancient, I'm afraid, but still perfectly serviceable.
Don't point them at me, there's a good fellow. And don't throw them onto the table like that, they might go off.
I'm not completely obtuse, Rouletabille. I haven't loaded them yet.
They might go off.
What's that?
You're a remarkable fellow, Saint-Clair. You've just provided me with another clue.
Oh, thank God for a decent fire. Oh, I'm chilled to the bone.
Yes, there's a mist rolling in from the forest.
Hello, what's this? Pistols at dawn?
Nothing so dramatic, I'm afraid. We've been asked to guard Mademoiselle Stangerson.
Oh.
It's Robert Darzac's idea. He thinks the attacker may try his luck again tonight.
I have to tell you, gentlemen, I do not approve.
Oh, it's no good trying to dissuade us. Our minds are made up.
Well, in that case, perhaps you'd better join me for supper in my rooms. If I can't prevent you from taking the law into your own hands, I can at least make sure you do it after a decent meal.
My compliments to the cook. That was excellent.
Thank you, sir.
Another glass of wine, Rouletabille?
Why not?
Monsieur Sanclair, are you sure you won't join us?
Perfectly sure, thank you. Despite Rouletabille's insinuations, I'm not a great drinker.
May I have your plate, sir?
Yes, of course.
You seem tired, Inspector.
I shall be glad when this case is over. It is starting to take its toll on my constitution.
I don't think we'll be here very much longer.
Oh?
There isn't really a great deal more to find out.
Do you know the identity of the attacker, then?
Do you?
Yes. Yes, I believe I do.
So do I.
Good heavens.
I wonder, Monsieur Rouletabille. Can we be thinking of the same man?
That depends.
Depends? Depends on what?
On whether or not you've changed your mind.
I see.
Robert Darzac is entirely innocent.
I'm afraid I beg to differ.
Then it's a fight to the finish. You against me.
Are you sure about that?
Yes, Larson. Perfectly sure. And believe me, I fully expect to win.
After we'd finished dining with Larsan, Rouletabille asked me to go outside and check the grounds for signs of disturbance. Illuminated by moonlight and enshrouded in mist, the estate seemed filled with hidden danger, and I willingly confess that I was more than a little grateful for the loaded revolver in my jacket pocket.
Are you still here?
It was Monsieur Corbeau, the gamekeeper.
I thought you and your friend would have returned to Paris by now.
We prefer to remain and protect Mademoiselle Stangerson.
You can't protect her, sir. No one can.
And what, pray, is that supposed to mean?
It's the devil who's at the bottom of all this. The devil or one of his servants. You must be addled if you think you can pit yourself against him.
I would dearly have liked to rebuke the impudent fellow for addressing me in such a fashion. But before I could open my mouth, he turned on his heel and vanished into the mist.
Take my advice, sir. Get away from here. Get away from here whilst you still can.
For all their foolishness, I had found Corbeau's words curiously unsettling, and as I walked back towards Chateau Stangerson, it was as much as I could do to keep myself from trembling. At a little after 10, I lit the lamp outside Mademoiselle Stangerson's bedroom and started keeping watch. Rouletabille had promised to join me, but he failed to appear. At first, I felt merely irritated by his uncharacteristic absence. As the evening wore on, however, my feelings of irritation were replaced by ones of alarm. Finally, at midnight, my anxiety got the better of me, and abandoning my lonely vigil, I hurried to his room.
Rouletabille? Rouletabille? Are you there? Rouletabille? Come on, old friend.
I don't know.
Wake up.
Sanclair, where am I?
Well, it's all right. You were asleep.
What, asleep? What? That wine I had. It must have been drugged.
Well, that's why Larsan seems so tired.
Quickly, help me get up. We've got to get back to Mademoiselle Stangerson's room. Oh my God, Sanclair, we're too late.
It is impossible to describe the horror of the scene that greeted us when we burst into Mademoiselle Stangerson's bedroom.
Oh, my God. Oh, no.
She was stretched out on the floor, the front of her nightdress soaked in her own blood.
He's used a knife this time.
What is it? What's happened? Mathilde!
She's still breathing. Oh, thank God she's weak, but she's still alive.
Oh, Mathilde!
I failed her, Sanclair. I vowed to protect her and I failed.
Our minds had barely adjusted to the nightmarish scene in the bedroom before the air was torn asunder by another hideous cry.
It came from down in the courtyard. I can see people moving about. Stay with her, Professor. Come on, St. Clair. We may still be able to salvage something from this terrible night. Quickly! Shine the lamp over here.
Oh, my God. Another victim.
It's Monsieur Corbeau, the gamekeeper. He's been stabbed through the heart.
The poor devil. He must have tried to prevent the attacker from fleeing the house.
You're not going to like this, Rouletabille, but look who I discovered standing over the body.
I've already told you he was dead when I found him.
Monsieur Darzac? Why aren't you in Paris?
I'm sorry. I can't tell you that.
For pity's sake, Darzac, speak and save yourself.
I care nothing for my own welfare, Monsieur Rouletabille. You know that. Tell me about Mathilde.
She's still alive. Thank God. But she's badly injured, though. We can only pray that she has the strength to recover.
You must let me go to her.
You're not going anywhere. Robert Darzac, I'm arresting you for the murder of Monsieur Corbeau and the attempted murder of Mademoiselle Stangerson.
This is a travesty of justice, Larsan. You know he's innocent.
I know nothing of the kind. I've sent one of my men to fetch a police carriage. We'll wait outside until it arrives.
Don't give up hope, Monsieur Darzac. I'll not let them convict you.
Do you really think you can save him from the scaffold?
I already know what's happened here, St. Clair, and I know who's responsible. The only question is, can I prove it in time?
Robert Darzac came to trial 3 months later. He had reluctantly agreed to let me defend him, but he refused to offer any testimony on his own behalf. Rouletabille, I'm sure, would not have approved. But Rouletabille had vanished 6 weeks previously, and nobody knew where he'd gone.
It was a little after midnight. I heard the sounds of a scuffle and then a man's scream. When I ran into the courtyard, I discovered the gamekeeper lying dead on the ground and Robert Darzac standing over him.
Did you actually see Monsieur Darzac strike him down?
No, sir, I did not.
So your evidence is purely circumstantial, then?
If Monsieur Darzac is innocent, why does he refuse to explain what really happened in the courtyard?
He refuses to explain, does he?
Yes, Your Honor.
It is not for Monsieur Darzac to establish his innocence, Inspector Larsan. It is for you to establish his guilt.
Well said!
Rouletabille!
Good afternoon, St. Clair. Oh, and Mademoiselle Stangerson. I'm glad to see that you're sufficiently recovered to attend.
What the devil do you think you're doing, sir?
I'm greeting some old friends, Your Honour. And after that, I propose to prevent a terrible miscarriage of justice.
Silence! Silence! If you cannot contain yourselves, I shall clear the gallery.
I apologise for the lateness of my arrival, Your Honour, but I've only just stepped off a steamer from America.
Well, as far as I'm concerned, you can step right back on it. I know all about you, Monsieur Rouletabille, and I've no intention of allowing you to disrupt these proceedings.
Your Honour, if I might intervene...
Yes, Maître St. Clair.
I realise that Monsieur Rouletabille's behaviour has been a little unorthodox, but if he has genuinely uncovered some new evidence, I think we should hear him out.
What have you to say about all this, Inspector Larsan?
Monsieur Rouletabille is a very clever man, Your Honour. It's possible that he may have discovered something.
Something? I have discovered everything. I know the name of the attacker and why he struck. And I know how he was able to escape from the Yellow Room.
Very well, Monsieur Rouletabille. You'd better come through to my chambers.
I'm sorry, Your Honour, but I can't tell you anything until 6 o'clock.
What? This little joker's gone on quite long enough. Seize him, officers!
Please, Your Honour, in the interests of justice, I must beg the court's indulgence.
Do you really know how the attacker was able to escape from the Yellow Room, Monsieur Rouletabille?
Yes, Your Honour, I do. He was able to escape because he was never inside in the first place. And that, Your Honour, that is all I'm prepared to say until 6.
Saying nothing was a new experience for Rouletabille and not one he much relished. Sitting next to me in the judge's chambers, he sighed with relief as the clock struck 6.
At last, gentlemen, at last I can tell you what I know.
Just a minute, Monsieur Rouletabille. Inspector Larson is yet to join us.
You won't be seeing him this evening, Your Honor. Unless I'm very much mistaken, he'll have fled Paris by now.
Fled Paris? What are you talking about?
Isn't it obvious? Larson is the man who's responsible for these terrible crimes.
Oh, don't be absurd. Frédéric Larson is one of the Sûreté's most respected officers.
I know it's hard to believe, but the evidence I've assembled against him is overwhelming.
I don't understand. Why would Inspector Larson want to murder Mademoiselle Stangerson?
He was obsessed with her, Saint-Clair. It's as simple as that.
Obsessed with her? Explain yourself, young man, and be quick about it.
When I first interviewed Mademoiselle Stangerson, I noticed how reluctant she was to discuss her time in Philadelphia.
She lived there for 18 months with her aunt, Your Honour.
Determined to discover what she was concealing, I sailed to America and tracked her aunt down.
Extraordinary.
The old woman told me how her niece had fallen under the influence of a fellow countryman. She knew him as Jean Roussel, but he's better known to us as...
Frédéric Larson.
Mademoiselle Stangerson was young and innocent. Larson was older and more worldly. It's little wonder that she allowed him to seduce her, and eventually consented to become his wife.
They're married?
In case you doubt my word, here's a copy of the marriage certificate.
Oh, I need a glass of brandy. I've never heard a more astonishing set of revelations.
For a while, they were happy enough, living together in an old vicarage on the outskirts of Philadelphia. But their happiness was shattered when Mademoiselle Stangerson discovered that her new husband was already married.
Dear God. Well, that means that her own marriage was completely invalid.
Sadly, worse was to come. Larson was implicated in the murder of a business associate, and abandoning his bride, he fled back to France.
Good heavens.
Is there any brandy left in that bottle?
Mademoiselle Stangerson returned home a broken woman. She tried to forget her misery in the only way she knew how, by burying herself in her father's work.
Did Professor Stangerson know what had happened?
No, Your Honour, he did not. And that's the key to unlocking the rest of this mystery.
Before we proceed any further, I'd like to know why Larson chose to join the police force after he fled back to France.
It was the perfect hiding place. Who'd think of looking for him in the ranks of the Sûreté?
This is all very interesting, but when does Robert Darzac enter the story?
I was just coming to him, Your Honour. Monsieur Darzac had loved Mademoiselle Stangerson for years, and finally persuaded her to marry him.
I remember reading about their engagement in the society pages.
Naturally, she told him how she'd been deceived by Larson, and being a true gentleman, he willingly forgave her.
He's a noble soul, I've always said so.
Unfortunately, Larson was still obsessed with his former bride. He determined that she shouldn't marry Darzac, and he sent her a letter recounting their life together in America.
Ah, how pleasant was the vicarage and how colourful its gardens.
What?
Hoping to dissuade Larson from bothering her further, Mademoiselle Stangerson arranged to meet him one morning in the Yellow Room.
Aha!
Picture the scene, gentlemen. I insist.
Good morning, Mathilde. How radiant you look.
I trust that no one saw you enter.
Of course not. Discretion has always been my watchword.
I'll come straight to the point. I want to know what it will take to be rid of you.
Oh, Mathilde, you disappoint me.
I am not a wealthy woman, but I dare say I could raise a few thousand francs.
I'm not interested in your money. It's you that I want.
I'm engaged to Robert Darzac. You know that.
You deserve better than a glorified schoolmaster. Come away with me, Mathilde. Come away and live with me again.
Live with you, sir? I'd sooner die.
Mathilde, you're making me angry.
Everything about you disgusts me. You're cruel and wicked and vile.
Stop it, Mathilde. Stop it.
You're choking me.
I'm sorry, Mathilde. Forgive me. You shouldn't have spoken to me as you did.
You're mad. You're completely mad.
It's you who brought me to it. Every morning and every night. I can't get you out of my mind.
I warn you. I have a pistol.
It can't go on, Mathilde. I must be set free. If you won't come away with me, then I have only one choice.
Keep away from me.
I mean it, Mathilde. I'll kill you and have Robert Darzac convicted for the crime.
Get out of here!
Oh, my hand! Oh, it's bleeding.
Get out of here or I'll finish the job!
All right, Mathilde. All right. I'll leave for now. But you'll come to regret your actions this day. And so will Robert Darzac.
Fumbling for the door, Larsan leant heavily against the yellow wallpaper, leaving behind a single blood-stained handprint.
Oh, poor Mademoiselle Stangerson. What a terrifying ordeal.
To make matters worse, she couldn't contact the authorities. If her shameful secrets had become public knowledge, the disgrace would have destroyed her father.
The poor child. The poor child.
She put on a high collar to hide the marks of strangulation and continued working as normal.
Oh, what courage.
That night, however, she knew she had to sleep in the yellow room. It still bore the marks of her struggle with Larsan, and she couldn't risk them being discovered by her father. As she sleeps behind the locked door, Mademoiselle Stangerson is tortured by dreams of Larsan. Gradually, they grow more and more vivid. Larsan is coming for her. Larsan is coming for her. Convinced in her own fevered mind that Larsan has entered the room, she cries out for help.
Father, save me!
Mathilde! Open the door!
Maddened with fear, she reaches for her revolver. It falls to the floor, firing a single shot into the ceiling. As she struggles to retrieve it, she stumbles, striking her temple on the edge of the bedside table and knocking herself out. And that, gentlemen, is how they find her. Unconscious, bleeding, partially strangled, and quite alone.
I suppose it was the hair you discovered on the edge of the table that told you what had happened.
That, and the bullet embedded in the ceiling.
Astonishing, Monsieur Rouletabille. Quite astonishing.
The rest you already know. Pretending to investigate the mystery, Larsan conspired to murder his former bride. On the first night, he found her bedroom empty. But on the second...
That's all right, Rouletabille.
I'll never forgive myself for letting him stab her, Saint-Clair, never.
Robert Darzac is quite innocent, then.
Why don't we go down to the cells and ask him? When he knows how much we've discovered, he may be persuaded to talk.
I can see there's no further point in dissembling. Monsieur Rouletabille clearly knows everything.
You should have spoken sooner, Monsieur Darzac.
And risk disgracing Mathilde, I'd rather have died.
The evidence we discovered at Chateau Stangerson, the footprints and the bicycle tracks.
They were all manufactured by Larsan.
And your mysterious disappearances?
They were Larsan's work as well. He promised me the return of certain documents he had in his possession.
Love letters from Mademoiselle Stangerson.
Yes. Using them as bait, he lured me from the house at the most incriminating moments.
What diabolical cunning.
On my third trip to Paris, I realized that he had no intention of giving them up. I hurried back to Chateau Stangerson and arrived just in time to discover the body of the gamekeeper.
Poor old Corbeau. He was his final victim.
Yes, I suppose Larsan will be arrested now. I can't say I'm grateful, Monsieur Rouletabille. He'll no doubt reveal our secrets during his trial.
There isn't going to be a trial, Monsieur Darzac. I made sure that Larsan had time to escape.
That's why you wouldn't speak until 6.
After all the sacrifices you'd made for your fiancée, it seemed the least that I could do.
You once told me you weren't a gentleman, but you were mistaken. I salute you, Monsieur Rouletabille. You are the greatest gentleman of us all.
After the case against Darzac collapsed, Rouletabille returned to work. I wasn't to see him again until we were both invited back to the chateau a few weeks later. Another glass of the Professor's Burgundy?
Thank you, Saint-Clair.
Mademoiselle Stangerson seems a great deal stronger.
Monsieur Darzac tells me that she's expected to make a full recovery.
Will they marry, do you think?
Larsan certainly won't stop them. He was last seen boarding a steamer bound for Algiers.
Tell me, Rouletabille, what made you suspect him in the first place?
It was obvious. You remember when we chased an intruder from Mademoiselle Stangerson's bedroom?
Remember? I'll never forget.
As we pursued him downstairs, we encountered Larsan coming up. He told us that no one had passed him. Well, that was clearly impossible, so either he was lying or else...
Or else he was the intruder himself.
And then, of course, there was his walking stick.
His walking stick?
He didn't have gout, Saint-Clair. He had a bullet wound in his hand. Wrapping it around a walking stick enabled him to conceal it.
That's astonishing.
I need hardly add that only Larsan had the opportunity to drug my wine.
But he was as affected as you were.
A pitiful piece of play acting. He was still trying to deceive us, even at the end.
Oh, you should feel very proud of yourself. You've thwarted the schemes of a madman.
I suppose so.
What is it, Rouletabille? You seem a trifle gloomy.
This has been a dreadful business, St. Clair. We've encountered tragedy and violence at every turn. If it weren't for one consideration, it might be too much to bear.
And what consideration is that?
The whole thing has provided me with some excellent copy.
Oh, really, Rouletabille?
I haven't been able to tell the entire story, of course, but I've still managed to turn out a first-rate account.
You are incorrigible.
I can't be a gentleman all the time. Got a living to earn. Come on, St. Clair. It's getting late. Let's both drain our glasses and return to the house.
In The Mystery of the Yellow Room by Gaston Leroux, dramatized by Stephen Sheridan, Rouletabille was played by Nicholas Bolton and St. Clair by Charles Simpson. Geoffrey Whitehead was Inspector Larsan, Alistair Danson Darzac, Hugh Dixon Professor Stangerson, and Becky Hindley Mathilde. Stephen Thorne was Corbeau and the Judge, and Brian Parr Jacques and the Innkeeper. The Mystery of the Yellow Room was directed by David Blount.
Murder on the agenda.
Now may the grace of our Lord Jesus Christ, the love of God, and the fellowship of the Holy Ghost dwell richly in our hearts and be with those who mourn this day, now and forevermore. Amen.
Amen. Amen. Oh, hello, Sergeant.
Ah, Mr. Dukes, I saw you from the car. It was good of you to come.
Not at all. It would have been most odd for me to have stayed away. You remember Gwen Harris, of course, John Griffiths, Albert Thomas, Bernard Howells.
Of course. I'm so pleased you were able to get here.
Well, as Richard said, Sergeant, it would be odd if any of us stayed away.
Oh, yes. Good friends. I'm sure George would have been pleased.
Let's say he is pleased, Father.
Yes, I mean that.
We are pleased, too. I knew that Mr. Dukes would be coming, of course, and I rather hoped that the rest of you... Well, thank you.
It's not easy to find anything to say, Anne.
I know that. Nor do we know how we feel exactly. I suppose it's a blessing in a way. You will come back to the house?
Not now, Anne. They're all coming back to my flat.
We thought chat about old times.
We don't meet as often as we should.
We'll call in tomorrow, maybe.
You'll be welcome at any time.
Yes, you'll be very welcome. Thank you again for coming.
Sergeant Price, what a beautiful service. Very fitting, if I may say so. Bitter blow, Sergeant, a bitter blow. And yet, remembering how the boy suffered all those years. They'll be all right now, boys. We can go.
Well, I must say the old gent's taking it very well. But Anne's been a real brick. It must be a relief to both of them. And yes, at a time like this...
Is that you, Mr. Dukes?
Yes, Mattie, I'm back.
How many are you?
5.
Oh, I reckoned on 5. Well, come in, all of you, and get yourselves warm.
Thank you, sir.
I cut plenty of sandwiches, and the kettle is on the boil.
How are you, Mrs. Roy?
Oh, it was very good of you all to come. Now, you make yourselves at home while I get the tea. I closed this because of the draught.
Well, drink, anyone?
Oh, I think I could manage a whiskey. Beer for me.
Well, help yourselves. Time for a cup of tea.
Same here.
Oh, well, it was a nice service. More people there than I expected.
Yes, quite a crowd. You'd think that people would have forgotten poor old George. Stuck away for 5 years.
Anne took it very well, I thought. Oh, she's a sensible girl. She knows that George is much better off.
They all are. Good Lord, yes. Still, George was her husband, and it's bound to be a bit of a shock. Twice a week down at that confounded asylum for 5 years. In all that time, he hardly spoke to her. Must have been heartbreaking.
I don't know how she stuck it. I used to go down now and again. You know, I felt I had to, but it seemed so pointless. He never said a word. I never felt I was doing any good.
Well, Anne never had any doubts about that. About doing him good, I mean. She always knew that George was glad to see her, even though he might not speak at all.
Must have been pretty frustrating for all that.
Well, sometimes he would talk, and then he'd seem almost normal. He'd yap away about the winding path to Tredomen, or the fishing in the Gledier.
You were a pretty frequent visitor yourself, John. More so than the rest of us.
Well, yes, I went whenever I could.
I found it so devilishly difficult, when I always got so depressed. Just seeing the poor old chap sitting there like a mummy, wide-eyed and taut.
I dare say visiting was a bit easier for John. I mean...
Yes, maybe it was. I like being with Anne. Is that what you mean?
Oh, come now, old boy.
Well, why shouldn't you? I've never denied that I like being with Anne. I hope she liked being with me, too. Whether she's as fond of me as I am of her is another matter. I've never asked her.
Well, I'm quite sure, John, that you've been a real friend to Anne.
Well, I think she needed a friend. Believe me, boys, Anne's devotion to a man, dead in every sense of the word, was as splendid as it was pathetic. Now, well, I hope to make up to Anne for some of the years she's lost. If she'll have me, I'll marry her. Perhaps this is hardly the time to talk about it, but you might as well know where I stand.
Well, yes, as you say, John, this may not be the time to talk about such things, but nobody here is surprised at what you say. And I hope things will work out for you. I wonder if he ever said anything about the camp.
Well, not in my hearing. I don't suppose he remembered anything at all about it.
Oh, on the contrary, I doubt if he ever forgot it. I don't pretend to know much about these mental cases, but most of them seem happy enough. But with George, no. Unsmiling, silent, haunted. I have a horrible conviction that he lived down in that camp, that he never got away from it.
Not a very pleasant thought.
Well, we never understand these things, and maybe we are often influenced by what we think ourselves. But whenever I visited George, the whole thing had come back to me. The careful plans, the last-minute check-up, crawl through the tunnel, and the reception party waiting for us.
And Bill Brockington's face as the Jerrys marched us back in.
And George's screams as they tortured him.
God. Here we are, then. I'm sure you can all do with it. Was it a nice funeral?
There were quite a number of people there, Mattie.
How did Anne and Mother take it?
Very sensibly.
Well, they've been faithful enough, and nobody can say different. Not that it isn't a blessed relief to both of them, and to poor George. Yes, indeed. You might say that the poor chap has taken 5 years to die.
Yes, Mrs. Morris. And that's about the truth of it. Well, come on, help yourselves, boys. Come on, pitch in.
You must be feeling it a bit too, all 5 of you.
Well, we're all glad to know that George is out of his misery, Mattie.
Oh, so am I. For all that, there's something so final about a funeral, and one can't help feeling sorry for old Maddock and for Anne.
You've done your share of comforting, Mattie.
Oh, I've just given a hand with the food and things, that's all. And that's where I'm going now, down to the Price's house to clear up things for them. Look, after you finish, just put these dishes in the kitchen, will you? And I'll do them in the morning. Well, I'd say good evening to you all, then.
Well,
good evening.
Thank you.
Good night, Mattie. Well, she's one out of the bag, isn't she? You're lucky to have her, Richard. Oh, a bachelor is entitled to some compensation.
Well, I'm a bachelor, and I'm not so lucky with my housekeeper.
Well, Mattie isn't exactly my housekeeper, you know. She has her own family to look after.
She suits you, I should say.
Oh, yes. I like to have the place to myself in the evenings. By the way, Richard, isn't that play of yours due on this week? Yes, Thursday at 8:30.
It's all about our experiences in prison camp, isn't it?
Well, it's a play about prison camp, yes, but I try to deal with the lighter side, the fun and the frolic.
You must have a vivid imagination, Richard.
What's that, Burner? Hey, come out of that corner. You're too near my whiskey bottle.
Oh, I won't be here.
Now then, what were you saying?
I said you must have a vivid imagination. I don't remember any fun and frolic.
Well, there was the football team, Bernie, old boy. And the cricket.
Yeah, not forgetting the thespians. I'll never forget the night Richard split his pants.
What about John in Pygmalion?
Oh, you, Albert, playing the tarty piece in, what was the name of the play?
Yeah, I remember. Look here. When do we cut the cackle, boys, and start talking? And there are things to be discussed, aren't there? I take it you all know what I mean. Or do you or don't you?
We all know what you mean, Bernie. The point is, do we want a discussion?
You don't, is that it?
Oh, I didn't say that.
Richard?
Well, I suppose we can have a discussion, Bernie. Whether or not we shall all be thinking on the same lines is another matter.
Brockington wasn't at the funeral, was he?
I shouldn't think so.
Had there been flowers, he would have sent a big wreath in one of his limousines. Well, come on, Richard. You're the captain. Let's get talking, shall we?
All right, boys, all right. I'll try to put something into words. Now, in this play of mine on Thursday night, I tried to paint a picture of the lighter side of our life in prison camp. And to write this, I had to dig pretty deeply. The hell I remember vividly. And there's no doubt in our minds as to what was the most hellish part of all.
5 years is a long time to remember a man's screams in the night. But I hear them over and over again. Why only George? That's what's always puzzled me.
If they got us together for torture, we'd have given each other moral support. Besides, George was the leader.
I remember one night in particular. They must have given him a rest during the day, and then, just after lights out, they started. Oh, what the hell.
Oh, don't let's rake it all up. Get to the point, Richard. Well, it was obvious to us all that Bill Brockington had split on us. If we needed any proof, then the look on his face when the Jerrys marched us back into the camp would have given it us. He told the guards all he knew. But he didn't know enough. George had all the escape plan locked in his mind, so they tortured him until he cracked up. And the 5 of us swore, didn't we, that if George died, Bill Brockington would die too. If we'd killed him there and then, it would have been easy.
And it's not so easy now, eh?
Well, is it?
Lots of water has gone under the bridge. Time mellows. Well, not for me, it doesn't. I hate the swine today as much as I did then. We all hate him, Bernie. But what do you propose we should do? Go out and shoot him? Might be as good an idea as any.
There's a price to pay for that sort of thing.
Bigger than the price George paid?
Well, maybe not.
Now,
but
look,
surely
boys,
you
don't let's fall out with each other. Let's discuss the whole thing calmly, if we can. I suppose we can be called respectable citizens, and some of you have families. Cold-blooded killing seems rather remote from us all. Do we feel as strongly now as we did 5 years ago? And if we do, can we implement those feelings? Are we going to say now that we want to kill this man?
And if we say yes, Richard, what then? Somebody has to do the job. Somebody has to go along to Brockington's house, take out a gun and shoot him. Or a knife and stab him. Those are the cold facts. And if we say no, Richard, what then? If we say that all this was a long time ago, the war's over and forgotten. George Price has taken 5 years to die, but he rests in peace at last. We go home tonight and put our heads on a pillow and thank God for our homes, our comforts, prosperity, or what have you. And do we forget about the torture, about our oath, about the swine we swore to kill, and just drop off to sleep? Oh, no, not tonight we won't. Not for many nights to come. If you heard his screaming in the night, you won't hear it any less just because George is under the sod.
Anyone else? There's a lot in what Bernie says.
Well, if none of you chaps feel as I do...
We haven't all had our say, Bernie.
So I notice.
Nobody here has any love for Brockington, Bernie. But snake that he is, the law is bound to catch up with him. Would you be prepared to take the rap? Is he worth hanging for?
That's not the point.
Or perhaps we wouldn't be found out. Perhaps Bernie thinks we could cook up an ingenious scheme.
It wouldn't be the first game we've cooked, would it?
What have you to say, Richard?
Oh, what can I say? I'm a writer. But I couldn't think up a more ludicrous situation than this. 5 staid, respectable men discussing whether or not they'll take another man's life. Murder on the agenda. All in favor say aye, have another drink and good night. On the other hand, we took an oath. Maybe the oath as such is not all that important, but we have to meet up with Brockington. He lives in this village. And then there's Anne. I see her every day, and you all see her fairly often. And George's father, the old sergeant. We meet him, too. I don't suppose we shall ever be able to wipe out the memory of that suffering. Nor shall we ever forget what we swore to do.
That's what I mean. It's not going to be easy, but what's the alternative? I should be haunted.
Don't let's get melodramatic.
I'm saying what I think, Quinn. You may be afraid to kill this man. I should be afraid to let him live. Of course, there may be consequences. But anyone scared of them shouldn't be involved.
Sit down, Bernie. Be cool. Albert.
No one could hate the louse more than I do. But can we just take the law into our own hands? Somebody would actually have to do this. One of us. What do? Draw lots?
Yes. What did you say, Richard? I said we would draw lots. You can't be serious. I'm serious in this respect. If we're contemplating doing this thing at all, then the whole venture would have to be planned.
You've got some ideas, Richard?
Well, let me put it like this. A decision will have to be made. Even if we dismiss the whole thing, we still have to agree to dismiss it. But if we decide the oath has to stand, I suggest a plan.
All right, let's hear it.
Oh, wait a bit. We haven't decided anything yet.
Well, let's hear the plan anyhow. Sure, let's hear it. It should be interesting to know how to commit the perfect crime, even if we have no intention of committing it. The obvious alternative to murder is suicide. If Bill Brockington decides to shoot himself, I can at least provide the gun.
That's a Luger.
Well, we're not very impressed so far, Richard. The Luger's commonplace enough. But this one belongs to Bill Brockington. His initials are on the butt. And since Brockington will have marked other souvenirs in the same way, there won't be much doubt about the ownership. If you remember, boys, that was a hobby of his, carving initials. He did it rather expertly.
You mean that one of us shall shoot Brockington with his own gun?
That's part of the plan. How did you get hold of the gun, Richard? Accidentally. We all had our share of war souvenirs, and mine got mixed up with Brockington's. Had we been on better terms, I might have handed it over.
Before you go any further, Richard, I think there's one thing we should keep in mind. If anything happens to Brockington, somebody's going to remember that we were all in that hellhole together.
Of course.
Well, it doesn't sound very healthy, does it?
Not unless we can arrange a perfect alibi.
For whoever does the killing?
No. For the lot of us.
This drawing lots. Is it part of the plan, Richard, that none of us shall know who did the shooting?
That's it.
Go on from there, Richard.
We put 5 papers in a hat with a cross on one of them. Well, that's straightforward enough.
Then this alibi.
On Thursday night, my play goes out on television. Well, what more natural than that we should all meet here to see it? A most suitable occasion for a reunion. The play starts at 8:30, and you'd all leave your homes, allowing enough time to get here by 8:15. I would spend the early part of the evening in the Red Lion and leave there at about 8:10.
Well, that's clear enough.
But nobody arrives here at the appointed time, not even me. What we each do will be our own affair, as long as we keep out of sight. Now, we all get here at 9 o'clock, or thereabouts, by which time the man with the cross will have shot Brockington and placed the gun in his hand.
I see. Then we'd all swear that we arrived here at 8:15.
And nobody would know whom we were protecting. Not even us.
Well, find the snags thus far, boys.
There are none.
Not so fast, Bernie. Why do you have to be out of the house, Richard, when you're the host? 2 reasons. I have to let people know that I'm expecting you, and I may be the one to draw the cross.
Oh, yes, of course.
Next?
How can we be sure where to find Brockington?
Well, the chances are 100 to 1 that he'll be watching this play, too.
There is the obvious snag, of course. We could be questioned about the play.
I have some spare copies. You have 3 days to study the first 30 minutes of the script.
Then some policeman will ask us about a technical hitch. We'll try to talk round it, and then he'll tell us there wasn't one.
Oh, I think I can knock out with that side of it. If there is a hitch, then I'll know about it.
It's a good idea, boys. Simple but ingenious. We can all be depended upon to protect the man with a gun, and we won't know who it is we are protecting. We arrive half an hour late and swear we came on time.
But don't you think, Richard, that an alibi for 5 people is more of a pill than an alibi for 1? Well, if we know who does the job, a clever detective might trap us into giving him away. But if we don't know...
There must be some snags.
Well, maybe there are, but we have time to look for them. Mind you, I'm not saying that we should do this thing. All I say is, if we decide to go ahead, then we must look after ourselves. Now then, what about...
Thank you. It was kind of you to come. Oh, dear, Mrs. Bevan's a kindly woman, but she does talk.
Never mind. That's the last of them. I'll get a nice quiet cup of tea before I go.
Oh, no, I don't want any tea, thank you, Mattie.
It's not what you want, Merky, but what you're going to get.
You've been on your feet all day, Mattie.
Then I'll be sitting down with you in just 2 minutes. I've got it all ready.
Tired, Merky?
It's been a bit of a day.
For me, too. I suppose in a few days we'll realize that this is a blessing for us all, but we're bound to feel a bit empty at first.
Yes. Yes, I think that's the word. Empty.
I marvel at you, Angela. Many girls in your position would be as bitter as gall.
Being bitter won't help, will it?
10 years of marriage, 2 of them your husband spends in a prison camp and 5 in an asylum.
I try to think of the happy 3.
I'm not one for talking, Anne, but I'm not blind to how good you've been.
You've been pretty good yourself, Dad.
Here we are, then. Fresh pot of tea and some tasty sandwiches. Huh?
I don't think so.
Come on. Maddock? Isn't it funny, Maddock? I always call you that when you haven't got your old uniform on. But when you're in your buttons, I call you Sergeant, sort of automatic.
The inspector always said it was a mistake to leave me in my old village. Too familiar, he said, but I managed to keep the peace.
Oh, indeed, yes. There, now, come on, eat, both of you. Lucky I put some of this ham away, or those Gormans would have polished the lot.
No wonder, Matty. You pressed them enough.
You know, I sometimes think it's all wrong to turn a funeral into a feast. But on the other hand, I suppose some people come from a long way and they have to eat. After all, there's nothing disrespectful in a nice bit of boiled ham. Now, come on, eat, both of you. It's no use neglecting your stomachs. I know it's hard for both of you. You to lose a husband, Anne, and you, Maddock, to lose a son. But the poor boy is better off, and it's a blessing for all three.
Right, now, all set, boys. I'm sorry this has to be so theatrical, but if we're not to know who takes the gun, it has to be done this way.
The gun's loaded, of course?
Yes, it is. Now, I've put it in the glove box out in the hall, and I've closed the lid. The only man to open the lid will be the man with the cross. Each man will go out into the hall in turn, closing the door behind him. Then the man with the cross will open the glove box quietly, take the gun and go. Okay?
Right.
Mm-hmm. And then we meet on Thursday as arranged. Right. Come on, Bernie. Shake that hat, will you?
All right.
Right. Gwyn, you shall have first pick.
Well, I needn't look at it until I'm in the hall.
And then close the front door as you leave. Then we'll know you're gone. Good night.
Night.
Good night, boys.
Albert, I'm glad you were able to come along.
Mm. Good night, boys.
Your turn, Bernie.
Yes. All right. I'll see you Thursday, then. You're at 8:15, you said?
For the record, yes.
Good night.
John. About Anne. She thinks a lot of you. Anything I can do to help you at any time?
Oh, you've already been a great help to her.
Oh, nonsense. She's a good secretary. She's a big help to me. Well, your turn.
I've got a horrible feeling that I'm going to pick that cross.
Shall I pick before you?
No. I'll take it as it comes. As you say, Richard, this is a bit theatrical. But it's jolly effective. And I'll see you on Thursday.
Good night.
Oh, well. Are you still here, Anne?
I'm nearly through.
Oh. Well, how goes it?
I think you'll want to make several cuts.
Very likely.
There's no hurry for this, is there?
Oh, no, none at all.
Oh, I'd like to get home before Dad.
Yes, of course. How is he?
Splendid. But just for a day or two, I'd like to be there when he gets home.
Yes, of course. I told you not to come to work at all. I'm not busy.
Oh, I'd prefer to work. So would he.
You're very devoted to your father-in-law, Anne.
He's devoted to me. Well, it's not surprising, is it, when we both felt so strongly about George?
No, perhaps not. Well, don't come into work if you don't feel like it.
How did rehearsals go?
Oh, the usual jumble. I marvel that it ever sorts itself out.
You still think I ought not to see the play?
I wouldn't advise it, Anne. Under the circumstances, I don't particularly want to see it myself. It's being put on at the wrong time for us all.
Look, nobody could have known that George was going to die. I hope it goes all right. Oh, by the way, the vicar phoned. His set has broken down, and he wondered if you might come here to see the play.
Well, what did you tell him?
Well, I said I thought you wouldn't mind.
Well, quite.
But I told him that Bernard Howells would be here, and since those two are not very fond of each other...
What did he say?
Well, I don't think he'll come.
You're not sure?
Maybe he'll give you a ring. Well, good night then, Richard. See you tomorrow.
Only if you feel like it. And look after Maddock.
He looks after me.
No exchange? Ah, hello, Mary. Get me 3-2, will you, please?
The vicarage?
Oh, hello, Vicar. Anne told me that you rang.
Oh, yes. My old set has broken down again, dear boy. I really think I should pension it off.
Well, you can come along here with pleasure. We'll be glad to have you join our little party.
Yes, Anne mentioned something about a party.
Well, hardly a party. Just a few of the chaps who were with me in the prison camp. We thought we might like to see the play together.
Oh, my dear Richard, I wouldn't dare intrude.
Oh, come, Vicar. I'm sure my friends will conduct themselves most respectfully.
Exactly. That's why I ought to stay away.
Well, really, I don't think...
No. You have your party, Richard. As a matter of fact, I am going along to another friend's house, Inspector Enoch Provert.
All the way to Newby?
It's not far, dear boy, and I owe the inspector a visit.
Oh, well, if you're quite sure, then...
Yes. I'll call in tomorrow evening and let you know what I think of it.
Do that. I'll have cleared away the empties.
Good. Well, thanks for ringing. I hope it goes well, dear boy.
Whew. For heaven's sake, Jean, turn that thing down. I'm trying to phone. No, I said 5-9. That's the Bryn Mill garage, isn't it? Come on.
Of all the bad-tempered things. Anyone would think I did it deliberately. Haven't you ever had a puncture?
Yes, my dear, I had one last Friday. And like a fool, I left the flat in the boot. But if you had told me when I got home about your puncture, I'd have repaired it. You knew I was going out.
I do now.
Bryn Mill garage.
Oh, hurry. I've got a flat. 2 flats. And I've got to get to Getty Dowell. Can you run me over?
Okay, in 15 minutes.
Oh, I could repair the puncture in that time. I want to go at once.
Okay, I'll send the boy.
Thanks.
Such a fuss. The play doesn't start until 8:30.
I keep telling you, we've all arranged to meet at 15:15. It'll take me 10 minutes to drive in.
Why didn't you phone John Griffiths and ask him to pick you up?
Why should I drag John out here?
It isn't much out of his way.
Oh, don't nag, Jean, just because I'm going out for one night.
I'm not nagging.
Heaven only knows I don't go out very often.
And I'm jolly glad you don't. All this fuss. Must be there at 15:15, hiring a car to take you. You'll all have a drink after the play, I dare say. So why should you be in such a tearing hurry to get to Richard Duke's place hours before the thing starts?
We've arranged to meet at 8:15.
It seems a stupid idea to me, anyhow. Meeting together to watch a play. Why couldn't you see it with me?
What is it? Quick work. TV 8:30. Don't forget to watch.
What else will I do, stuck here on my own?
I'll be home soon after 10. And as sober as a judge, cross my heart. TV, don't forget.
Good evening, sir. Oh, Mr. Griffiths, is it?
Oh, good evening, George. It's all right to leave my car there, I suppose.
Well, it's the official car park, as you might say. Not that it gets overcrowded, as you can see.
No.
Something on in the village hall makes a difference, mind you. And I can remember a night back last winter.
What time is it, George?
Oh, the church clock is dead right.
Yes, maybe it is, but I can't quite see it in the dark.
About 10 past, I'd say. Fair play for Ted Coity ever since he took charge of that there clock. Oh, thank you, sir. Thank you, indeed. I'll keep an eye on the car, sir. Depend on me.
Well, I'll be back about 10, I should think.
There's one thing about this car park, mind you.
Well, I must be going, boys.
What's the hurry, Mr. Duke? It's been all good to see you play in the long room.
Well, I've got some friends coming in. They're due any minute.
Bring them along here, then.
Well, maybe we'll come in out and play. I hope you enjoy it, boys.
Oh, we usually do.
Oh, good evening, Sergeant.
Oh, good evening, Mr. Dukes. I thought you had a play on the telly tonight.
That's right. 8:30.
Oh, I always thought that you would have to be down at the studio place seeing to things.
Well, I've been down to the rehearsals, but I prefer to see the show at home. In any case, I've got some friends coming in.
Now, how do I know about that?
Anne told you.
No. Oh, yes. It was P.C. Ben Thomas told me. He bumped into Bernard Howells in the mart, and he happened to mention it. You're having a little get-together.
That's right. You feeling all right?
Pretty good, considering. I'd rather be on duty anyhow.
What's the time?
Just coming up to 1:15, or would you call it down? Ah, there she goes.
Well, my visitors will be waiting on the doorstep. Good night, Sergeant.
Good night.
The cart's getting well.
Are you late, conductor?
No, sir. 8:15 will do ya.
Oh, thanks. Good night.
Good night, sir.
This is BBC Television. And now for our play, which is Nur Ironbar the Cage by Richard Dukes.
Oh, blast.
Yes? Hello. Brockington here. Hello. Yes, William Brockington. Oh, what the hell?
If you're happy, like if your mother-in-law's got the mumps or something. And Harry, pull up them tights, can't you? How do you think you're going to seduce the commandant with your tights like a ruddy concertina? Now then, for the love of Mike, let's have it a bit more cheerful, with a 1 and a 2 and a 3.
Who's there? What do you want? Get back. Keep away. I'll call the police.
Is that you, Bernard?
Yes, just made it.
Oh, I think I saw Gwyn just going. Ah, come in, boys, come in. They're on the stroke.
Are we all here?
Except for Gwyn. You didn't close the door?
No.
Good. Well, sit down, John. Help yourself to a drink, Bernie.
Thanks.
Albert, what'll you have? Oh, I'll switch on the set.
I crossed the allotments and came to the little wicket gate. We don't have to account for our movements, John. I thought that was understood.
Well, I simply mentioned that I crossed the allotment.
I think it's safe to keep off that track altogether. We've all been here since 8:20. Now, let's get that fixed so firmly in our mind we believe it ourselves.
All right, Bernie, all right. Don't be so damned edgy.
Where the devil's Gwyn?
Well, it's only just on mine. Ah, this is him. All right, Gwyn?
Yes. I closed the door. Is that all right?
Yes, you're the last.
I couldn't get across the road. 2 chaps on bikes stood nattering.
They didn't see you?
No, I made sure of that. What about the set?
It's warming up. Now, apart from where you've been and what you've been doing, has anyone anything to say? Nothing? Good. Now, you're all quite sure that you haven't been seen during the last half hour?
I'm sure. I made quite certain.
Well, I was dropped outside this door at 8:15 exactly, and I'm quite sure that nobody has seen me since.
Nobody saw me.
Fine. I had one little upset. The vicar's got trouble with his set, and he phoned to ask if he could come here.
Good Lord. Well, how did you put him off? But you couldn't put him off. Damn it, that'd muck up the whole thing.
Don't worry. I pressed him to come. When I explained that we had a little party, he excused himself.
Oh, but things have crop up.
But it serves to suit us as it happens. The fact that you pressed the vicar to come, Richard, is a further proof that we were meeting to see the play.
Yes, that's true. Oh, by the way, we'd better watch the play, haven't we?
I'll be right. Either we got a ship to ready the car or repaint the cloth.
How many cloths do you think I can paint? I'm right out of Eccleford Levine anyhow, and I don't pinch any more peppermints as the commandants used it all for the drawings.
Why don't we have a magic carpet, then we can play the Pennington against the sky?
How long should we wait here, Richard? The play's been over for half an hour now.
Well, I think we should wait another half hour or so and then leave rather noisily. I hope you saw enough of the play to know what it's all about.
Well, I'm afraid I'd be a bit shaky if I were questioned about it. I wasn't concentrating.
And you should say as little as possible.
Well, who remembers the play in detail, anyhow?
Well, I've read it, so I know it fairly well.
What about technical hitches, Richard?
I don't think there could have been any. It finished on time, didn't it? May I put a point, Richard? Yes, by all means. Now's the time for a check-up. Well, I don't think we can depend on this suicide angle. We've done what we can to make it look like suicide, at least I assume we have, but the police have means nowadays of finding out about such things.
We knew from the start that there was a pretty good chance of us coming under suspicion.
And our scheme is foolproof.
Well, I'm only anxious that we should take every precaution.
Well, we've done that. Don't let's hold an inquest.
What's tickling you, Bernie?
Well, it's an odd situation, isn't it? We've all been involved in killing a man, and only one of us knows if he's dead.
Well, let's drink to success, boys.
Yeah.
A toast, gentlemen. A toast to the police. May they have calm, untroubled minds.
Yeah. Excuse me. Getley Dowell, double two.
Oh, hello, Richard. You've not heard the news?
What news, Vicar?
About poor Bill Brockington. He's committed suicide.
Committed suicide? Good heavens, when did this happen?
Sometime this evening. I was having supper with Inspector Enoch Probert, and he was called out.
Have you seen the inspector since?
No, I stayed here to finish my coffee, and he phoned me later.
Well, what are the details?
Well, it seems that Brockington was watching your play. The set was still on when the inspector got to his house. He'd shot himself through the head.
Good heavens.
Yes, well, I'm just about to go home now, but I thought I'd let you know.
Yes, thanks. It was kind of you. It's a bit of a shock, isn't it?
Indeed it is. Well, good night then, Richard.
Thank you for ringing, Vicar. Good night. Through the head. He shot himself through the head. Well, let's hope it stays that way. If not, let's hope the plan is as good as we think it is.
I think we're just about finished here now, sir.
Good.
We'll take the gun to the lab, of course.
Of course.
We'll go then, sir.
I'll stay for a while to both around. You stay with me, Sergeant.
Stay, sir?
I mean Sergeant Maddox Price. He knows more about this village and the people than any man alive. That's right, isn't it, Sergeant?
You know the village pretty well yourself, Inspector.
See you later, sir.
Yes, I'll be down at the local station. Well, Maddox, a bit of an upset, isn't it?
It is indeed, sir.
Nice room. I wouldn't have thought that Mr. Brockington had such taste. Have you ever been here before, Maddox?
Not in this room, sir.
This is a nice bit of illegal war souvenir, isn't it?
German, I suppose, sir.
Nice bit of engraving on the case, too. W.B. Brockington seemed to have been very clever at this sort of thing.
Yes, it's very nicely done.
Gave him something to do when he was in that prison camp, I suppose.
Surprising what those chaps turned their hands to, sir.
Brockington turned his hand to other things, so I'm told.
So I understand, sir. Well, I don't suppose it's any secret that Brockington wasn't a very popular man.
Your son, for one, wouldn't have been very fond of him?
George never mentioned him, Inspector, but he never mentioned anyone else either.
I was very sorry to hear about George, Maddox.
You were always very kind to inquire about him, sir.
I don't suppose it was odd that he should be looking at the play. Mr. Brockington, I mean.
I'd say it was a natural thing for him to do.
Knowing Richard Dukes and knowing something of the true story behind the play?
I don't think Mr. Dukes was a friend of his, Inspector.
No, maybe not. Say, what do you think about this, Maddox?
Me, sir?
You knew Brockington?
You knew him too, sir.
I'm asking you.
Well, Inspector, it looks as if he's committed suicide, as far as I can see, anyway. But I wouldn't have said he was the type to kill himself.
It's always a bit of a bother, Sergeant, when the facts quarrel with convictions. Of course, the lab boys may tell us that this wasn't suicide at all.
And that wouldn't surprise you, sir?
It wouldn't surprise you either. Tell me, did you see the play last night, Maddox?
No, sir. It wasn't the kind of thing I'd want to see just now.
Of course not. I understand. Well, I don't think there's anything else I want to see here. We'll keep the room closed, Sergeant.
Yes, sir. I'll put a constable on duty, sir.
Good man. I must say that the village looks as clean and as fresh as it always did. It was always surprising to me that so near to the fort.
Well, if it's all the same to you two, I'm off. My old man will think that I've left him. And that would be what you'd call wishful thinking.
It's your own fault that you're late, Mattie.
Oh, maybe it is. I wanted to finish the bedroom, then I can have a day off on Saturday. You just coming on, Van?
Oh, you go along, Mattie, don't worry.
Oh, what's a mystery now? Well, whoever it is, I'm not staying. I never thought to be as late as this. Do with Inspector Enoch Propert.
Hello, Mrs. Morris. Is Mr. Dukes in?
Well, did you want to see him?
That's why I called.
Oh, you'd better come in. The police.
Oh. Hello, Inspector. Come in. Come right in.
Thank you.
You know Anne, of course, Mrs. Price.
Yes, certainly.
How do you do, Inspector?
I was very sorry to hear about your husband, Mr. Price.
Thank you. You knew George, of course.
Oh, yes. I spent several years in Gefty Dowell when I was a constable. One remembers the happy times. Don't leave on my account.
Oh, I was just going, anyway.
Is it all right for me to go, Mr. Dukes?
I think so, Mattie. I doubt if the inspector has come to arrest me.
I'll get your coat on.
Oh, if you will, Mattie. I just want to stick some of these stamps on. My gloves are in the glove box.
Right-o.
Sit down, Inspector.
Thank you. This business of Brockington is upsetting, isn't it?
For whom, Inspector?
Well, in such a quiet village.
I don't think there are many villagers shedding tears over Brockington, Inspector. So why should we pretend that the affair is upsetting? Speaking for myself, I shan't spare him aside.
Well, that's frank enough. And what about you, Mrs. Price?
You probably know my story, Inspector. I'm glad that Mr. Brockington is dead.
Oh, well, it's nice to know where we all stand.
Well, I'm taking the post, Richard. Good evening, both.
Now, good evening.
Good night, Anne.
You'd better put this on, I think, Murphy. It gets quite chilly at this time of the day, and I don't...
Well, it's nice to see you, Inspector, but to what am I indebted, etc., etc., etc.
Can't I just be sociable?
I suppose you could if you tried.
Well, for one thing, I wanted to tell you that I enjoyed your play.
Good. I always counted you one of my fans.
Yes, it was good. It seemed so real. Not that I was ever in a prison camp myself, but one could believe in it. It had a ring of authenticity.
The author has always to colour the truth a little for dramatic effect.
But only delicately coloured it, I should say. That slight, almost imperceptible exaggeration.
You should have been a writer yourself.
I nurse a secret ambition. One of these days, I'll break out and use my creative genius on one of my dullest reports.
Yes, well, now then, tell me why you've come.
I'm inquiring into the death of Mr. Bill Brockington.
Obviously. But why inquire here?
My dear Richard, we inquire everywhere. We travel along unlikely and uninteresting tracks. Sometimes we stumble on something which leads to something else, but in the main, we just retrace our steps, unrewarded.
Pretty dull.
Dull and frustrating. Lots and lots of routine, fingerprints, photographs, interviews, examination of reports, and putting 2 and 2 together to make 3.5.
But science is your ally nowadays.
Science gives us this 3.5, but it's the missing half that counts. And, as often as not, that's the something we just stumble upon.
And what are you hoping to stumble upon here?
We're looking for 1 or 2 things.
Such as?
A reason for Brockington to have committed suicide. Can you help me there?
No, I wouldn't have thought him that kind of a man. What next?
If he didn't shoot himself, then we would like to know who did.
You're asking me?
For any information which might help.
I haven't any. I might have considered doing the job myself 5 years ago.
Why?
Well, come now, Inspector, you know the prison camp story. That's why you called here. But hate, like love, mellows with the years. I'm not sorry for what's happened to Brockington, but I wouldn't have taken any risks for him. So don't look for a dramatic confession from me.
Do you think he might have been murdered?
I'm assuming that you think so.
Life gets increasingly difficult for a policeman, Richard. The more we learn about crime, the more the criminals learn. A young scallywag who wants to steal a bicycle nowadays will wear a pair of gloves. What's the use of our elaborate equipment for testing for fingerprints if the crooks leave none behind?
Yes, I should think that even the most modest crook is pretty wary about fingerprints nowadays.
In this case, there are no prints.
Tell me, Inspector, what leads you to conclude that this was not a case of suicide?
Did I say it wasn't?
You imply it.
Well, what bothers us is the absence of reason. I have a feeling that Brockington was murdered. Then, as I said, the fingerprint.
You said there were none.
That's what I mean.
I don't follow.
Oh, come, Richard, that's obvious enough. The complete absence of fingerprints would suggest a careful intruder.
But why an intruder at all?
There were no prints on the gun.
None?
Let me qualify that. There were just a few. Brockington's forefinger shows on the barrel, and his palm is clearly seen on the butt.
So the gun was in Brockington's hand?
Yes.
Well, aren't you satisfied with that?
But he would have had to pick up the gun from a drawer, handle it quite a bit before pulling the trigger. You could hardly expect him to have put on a glove for all these preliminaries, and taking off the glove to make a kill.
Yes, I see. Have you identified the gun?
A German Luger. Commonplace enough.
So it could have been Brockington's own gun?
Of course.
So someone walks into Brockington's lounge, goes to a drawer, takes out a gun with Brockington's initials on the butt, sticks it close to the victim's head and shoots. What is Brockington doing meanwhile? Looking at my play, I presume?
Who said anything about the initials on the gun?
Didn't you?
No, I don't think so.
Oh, well, Brockington carved initials on everything.
Ah, yes. Yes, that's a good point.
You probably noticed a lot of his carving around.
I did indeed. W.B. Very artistically done. Well, I must go.
Oh, you're not going already? I haven't given you a drink.
I can only be sociable when I try to be, and just now I haven't the time to try. I have other calls to make.
I hope the others will prove more fruitful.
You've never written a detective play, Richard?
No.
You should. Then I could help you.
Not if you think your work is dull.
But we would concentrate on the more interesting features. Those elusive fractions, remember? 2 and 2 make 3.5, and it's the other half that counts. Think of our little chat. Dull for the most part, but a significant fact emerges.
A fact?
One lonely little detail.
And what was that?
The best detective keeps his secret and throws his proof into the murderer's face in the last act.
You seem convinced that Brockington was murdered.
I didn't say so.
Well, fortunately, I can account for my movements. I was at home last night watching my play.
And you had company, I'm told.
You were told?
The vicar sensed that you would be unwelcome here.
Oh, yes, Bernard Howells was here. They don't see eye to eye.
Who did you have altogether?
Well, since the play was based on our experiences in the prison camp, I thought it would be rather nice if the chaps who were together there...
So that would be Bernard, Gwyn Harris, Albert Thomas. Who else?
John Griffiths. Just the 5 of us.
And George Price would have made the 6th. Ah, well. Good evening, Richard. I'll be seeing you.
Good evening, Inspector.
Well, Albert. Wait, I'll turn this off.
I've brought back the plane.
The plane?
You asked me about it last night.
Oh, yes, of course. But there's no hurry, old boy.
I'm just getting some tea.
But Jean, I'm not staying.
I won't be a minute.
What's all this about a plane?
Just an excuse for coming here.
But why an excuse at all?
Because it looks as if the suicide idea has gone down the drain already.
So what?
A clear case of suicide would have saved us a lot of worry. Anyhow, Enoch Robert has already been to see Richard.
He didn't waste much time.
No. Richard asked me to warn the rest of you to behave as naturally as possible.
It's not very natural for you to bring back my perishing plane for a start. You never return anything.
Well, I had to give Gwen some reason for my coming here. So I said you wanted a plane. You mentioned it last night at the party. That's what I told her.
All right. Forget about the plane. What did Richard tell you?
He thinks that the inspector will call on the rest of us. We are all to admit that we hated Brockington's guts.
But Albert, old boy, all this has been arranged. I haven't forgotten.
I'm doing what I'm told to do. Richard asked me to warn you.
Okay, keep your wool on. Don't be so edgy.
No, that's the kind of thing we have to watch.
Okay, you watch it. I'm feeling fine. I never had any enthusiasm for this plan of ours, but now that Brockington is dead, I feel a deep personal satisfaction.
I suppose I'm the edgy type.
I don't think you deserve any tea, Albert, being as you call here about once in a blue moon.
I should come oftener, I know.
One would think that you boys, having gone through so much together, would have some sort of a bond.
Well, maybe we saw too much of each other in Germany.
Friendship wears a bit thin behind the wire fence.
This is my at-home day. Pour out, Gwyn.
This could be the inspector now.
Well, all right, Albert, all right. It's perfectly natural for you to call and see me, even without my drink.
Yes, sir. I suppose it is.
Come in, Inspector, come in. I don't know why you called, but you're very welcome. Move that thing, Gwyn, for the inspector to sit.
Oh, my fault. It's my plane. Gwyn's plane, rather. He nagged me about it last night, and I brought it back.
A bit of a do-it-yourself chap, are you, Albert?
Well, I like working about the house.
Well, with my tools, mainly.
Tea, Inspector?
Well, now, that's most kind of you, Mrs. Harris. Thank you. I dare say you're wondering why I've called.
Not really, Inspector. You're probably making inquiries about Bill Brockington. And you know that we spent some time together. You want to know what I thought of him. He was a swine.
Nice cup of tea, Mrs. Harris.
I had no great affection for him either, Inspector.
Could either of you chaps suggest any reason you might have had for taking his life?
Remorse?
He saw his sins piling up before him like a mountain, and he couldn't take it.
Not a very good theory, I'm afraid.
What happened, Inspector? All the talk in the village is that he committed suicide.
We can't stop people talking. My job at the moment is to find out as much as I can about Brockington.
And I'm quite sure you already know what we can tell you. He squealed on us in prison camp.
Yes, so I've heard. I wonder you chaps let him get away with it.
Oh, but Jerry saw to that. They took him to their bosoms. They never even got a chance to kick his shins.
Then, when the war was over...
Well, you know how it is, Inspector. Tempers cooled. We were too busy looking after ourselves.
Yes, I dare say. Well, boys, just for the records, can you account for your movements last night between, say, 8 and 10 o'clock?
That's easy. We were all at Richard's flat watching his play.
Who do you mean by all?
Well, there were a lot of us. I mean, we were a little gang together in the prison camp, and Richard suggested we should have a little party.
And when was this arranged?
When we all met at the funeral.
At George Price's funeral?
Yes.
It was after the funeral, actually. We all went along to Richard's flat for a drink.
Yes, I see. Then you arranged to meet again to watch the play. That would be about 8 o'clock, huh?
8:15, actually.
What time did you leave here, Gwyn?
I had a flat tire, so I phoned for a car. We left here soon after 8.
A hired car. I told him he had money to burn.
Time is time, G.
Not with you, it isn't.
And you, Albert?
I live pretty near the village. I must have left the house soon after 8. Anyhow, I arrived on time.
Then you all saw the play, had a drink, and went home.
Well, it wasn't much of a drink. The vicar phoned about Brockington.
Well, that's all pretty straightforward, isn't it? Sometimes I think I waste an awful lot of time asking pointless questions. But these things have to be done. Oh, well, thanks for the tea, Mrs. Harris. Quite a nice-looking plane, this. Worth borrowing, eh, Albert?
Gwyn has a splendid kit of tools, and they last forever at the rate he uses them. Albert must have had that plane for 6 months, and Gwyn hasn't missed it.
Well, I'm sorry to have disturbed you.
Good night, Inspector.
Good night, sir.
Good night.
Nice of you to call, Inspector. It made us feel sort of important, if you know what I mean.
There you are, Albert. What's wrong with that?
Nothing. He was very pleasant. Too pleasant.
Enoch Probert was always the same. Everybody says he's a nice chap.
I bet he sends Christmas cards to all the chaps he puts in jail.
We'll have some more tea. Dean, are you bringing more water? I think this is a bit strong.
Is that you, Father?
Yes, it's me. Sorry I'm late, Murphy.
I thought you were never coming home.
It's a pity I don't get paid overtime, I reckon.
What makes you so late?
I had to stay in charge of the place until Ben Thomas relieved me. Oh, dear. A cup of tea first, Stanlock.
It's all waiting, and I've got a nice piece of pie.
Lovely. Poor old Ben has been dashing about like a scalded cat between one thing and another. There's a lot to be done, I suppose.
It must have been pretty horrible for you.
Well, I've never been on a murder case before, and anything new is interesting, even if it isn't pleasant.
You think Mr. Brockington was murdered, then?
I don't know. Maybe I shouldn't have used that word. Let's say that the inspector isn't satisfied that he committed suicide.
Have you got any ideas about who might have done it?
If I had, Anvark, I wouldn't be telling you. One thing you can be sure of, Enoch's got his nose into something.
He called to see Richard, you know.
Did he?
You don't seem surprised.
I'm not surprised at anything, Anne. But when Detective Inspector Enoch Probert is on the scent...
What possible scent could he be on visiting Richard?
I don't know. It's all very worrying.
Well, if somebody killed Brockington, I can only hope that this case will be one of the inspector's failures.
You mustn't say such things, Anne.
Why not? If anyone has cause to be glad that Brockington's dead, it's me.
Anne.
George was tortured until he went out of his mind, and Brockington was the man responsible. I'm only sorry for one thing. He died too quickly. It took George 5 years.
It's not like you to be hard and bitter. In any case, it's all over and done with, and George is resting in peace.
All right, Father, but don't expect me to waste any sympathy on Mr. William Brockington.
Don't think I'm shedding any tears about Mr. Brockington, but there are things about his death that worry me. George had friends, and Mr. Dukes was only one of them.
But you don't think Richard had anything to do with this, surely?
It's not what I think that matters.
It's a great pity you have to be concerned with this business at all. If only you'd retired last year,
Don't
but
let's go over that again.
But if you'd listened to me, you'd have been out of all this. I don't like you being mixed up in it.
I'm giving in my notice at the end of this month.
Is that a promise?
I cross my heart. I think I've had enough now.
Oh, good. I'm jolly glad. Now take off those boots and I'll get a meal. I've got a feeling that this time...
Sergeant Willis, you pour yourself another cup of tea, and I'll have one too.
Oh, yes, sir.
What do you think of the Gatley Dowell police station, Sergeant? Not exactly Scotland Yard, is it?
Well, the tea is good, sir.
Sure. It always was. I came here as a young constable, you know.
Yes, sir. So I've been told.
John Griffiths. He arrived at the car park just after 8.
That's right, sir. And the car park attendant confirms that.
Car park attendant?
The chappie hanging around for the odd drink, sir.
Bryn Mill Garage. They agreed that Gwyn Harris hired a car and was dropped at Mr. Duke's door at 8:15.
That's right, sir.
And Mr. Dukes himself was seen by Sergeant Maddox Price. He was on his way home to see his play. Perfect alibis. Makes you wonder, Sergeant?
Why they should be so perfect, sir?
That's right. Let me see now. What exactly did P.C. Thomas say about Bernard Howells?
Nothing significant there, sir. Howells just mentioned that he was going to a party in Mr. Duke's flat.
Why should he have done that?
I see what you mean, sir. Rather making a point of it, perhaps.
Could be. But we mustn't let our imagination run away with us, Sergeant Willis.
What I feel... begging your pardon, Inspector.
Go ahead.
I feel we know so little about the dead man.
I feel I know too much about him. I know the whole village too well.
Isn't that an advantage, sir? An intimate knowledge of the people who may be concerned?
Could be, and it could be a bit of a bogey. I find myself making my own pictures. Theory is one thing, Sergeant. Conviction is better, but proof can be damned elusive.
If it was murder, sir, then the whole thing must have been very carefully planned.
Exactly. And I find myself picking out the clever people. In the small village, there are not many to choose from. That's where this intimate knowledge can be a bit of a devil. Might lead me right up the garden path. Now, well, you didn't find anything new in Brockington's place?
Nothing important, sir. We found another gun.
Another gun?
But locked away in a drawer, sir, and inside a deed box.
But you wouldn't call that unimportant, Sergeant Willis?
But it wasn't even loaded, sir.
But man alive... No, you wouldn't know. Yes, this may be interesting. Where is it?
I left it in the drawer, sir. Should I have...
No, that's all right. You can tell me all I want to know about it. It's a German Luger.
Yes, sir.
With the initials WB carved on the butt?
No, sir. No initials.
Are you quite sure?
Yes, sir, quite sure.
Now, that's a bit odd, isn't it? Or is it? 2 and 2 make 3.5. Add another quarter.
Beg pardon, sir?
No, forgive me, Sergeant. I'm just wondering. Well, now, this is a good report, Sergeant. All the salient points, no words wasted.
Thank you, sir.
But I'm afraid you'll have to see them all again.
Yes, Inspector?
I want you to arrange a little meeting. A great place for meeting, Gatley Dowell. I'd like an informal chat with Mr. Richard Dukes and his 4 friends.
Very good, sir.
I should see Mr. Dukes first, and I'm sure he'll put his rather splendid lounge at our disposal. And then if he agrees...
I'll help myself to another, Richard.
Yes, please do. I'm not much of a host, boys. Not tonight, anyway. Just take what you want when you want it. Oh, that'll be Albert. Don't pour one out for me, Bernie. Nor me. I'm taking it easy.
Well, same here. We must keep a clear head.
Come in, Albert.
What's all this about?
Well, you know as much as we do, old boy. The inspector wants to see us.
But why?
We shan't know until he tells us.
What do you have, Albert?
A stiff whiskey.
Make it a small one, Bernie, just to be on the safe side.
Am I the only one who's scared?
Well, I dare say we all feel a bit uncomfortable, Albert. But this is no more than we expected, is it?
What do you think he's up to?
Well, looking at the blackest possibility, I'd say that the inspector is developing the idea that one of us may in some way be involved.
I say that's black enough.
You need something more than suspicion.
Just you keep your wits about you, Albert.
I won't panic, Bernie. Don't you worry.
I didn't say you would.
Oh, now take it easy, boys. Nobody's worrying about anybody. We know each other pretty well by this time. You were always the edgy one, Albert, but in a crisis you were like a rock.
I'd rather there wasn't a crisis.
Well, just keep calm, boys, and stick strictly to the truth, except for the missing half hour. Now, you might spring a question about the play, but if you're not on shore ground, keep mum. I don't think Enoch will try the technical hitch gag. He's too old a bird for that, but if he does, there wasn't any. I've checked up and the whole thing went like silk.
Detective Sergeant Willis has been pretty busy. He checked up on me at the garage. Perhaps it's just as well that I hired a car.
Why does he want to see us all together? That's the puzzle. I would think he'd do better talking to us one at a time.
He's done that already. He or Willis.
Oh, they're giving me a miss then.
You've got such an innocent face, Bernie.
This is it.
Just one more thing, boys. Unless there's any special reason, don't stay here after the inspector. Leave with him or before him. We don't want him to think that we're going to hold an inquest. We're not in the least concerned. Well, best of luck.
This ought to make a good film story, if we get away with it.
We will, don't worry.
Then for the rest of our days, 4 of us will be making guesses about a 5th. Damn funny.
Well, here we are, Inspector. The culprits, as requested.
And all in good time, too. Good evening, gentlemen.
Good evening.
Now then, what do you have to drink, Inspector?
Nothing just now, thank you.
All right, as you please.
Well, now, it was good of you boys to come along.
We are agog with curiosity, Inspector. Why have you called us together?
I sometimes like to talk about the cases I'm on. It helps me to keep the facts in some sort of order.
Why talk to us?
Come now, Bernard. You know a good deal about this affair. Who better could I talk to? You all knew Brockington. You were all about the village on Thursday night. You might have seen something, even though you may not think it important.
Well, this sounds like a waste of time, Inspector. I saw nothing unusual anyhow.
All the same, if you don't mind, I'd like to chat.
By all means, chat away.
Well, then, let's first have a look at Brockington. If somebody killed a man, then it was made to look like suicide. And a pretty good job was made of it, too. But the lab boys are uneasy about one or two things. The fingerprints on the gun and the burn marks on the dead man's temple.
Could you explain that, Inspector?
I will indeed. When the gun is discharged in contact with the temple, there is a tearing of the skin, often in the shape of a cross. Most of the powder will be found inside the wound, but there will be traces of blackening or burning outside the hole. And the hair on the temple will be swollen or burnt.
Yes.
Now, if the weapon is fired more than an inch or so away from the head, then the effect is entirely different.
And you are telling us that this gun was not held tight against the skin?
That's right.
Oh, but, Inspector, what does that prove? It might be usual for a man to put a gun against his temple to shoot himself, but he doesn't have to do that. He could hold the gun 6 inches away.
Yes, quite right. Such a thought had already occurred to us, John.
Oh, I'm sorry.
The point is, if Brockington was killed, then who would want to kill him? Now, had I been a Scotland Yard man sent down to investigate this case, I would probably have looked first into Brockington's affairs. But being more or less a local man, I am helped by the things I know already. My inclination is not to probe into the present, but to recall the past.
I take it that you're referring to our experiences in the prison camp, Inspector.
It's an ugly story, isn't it? George Price was tortured and driven mad, and Brockington was largely responsible.
Rather a long time ago.
Exactly. And the men who might have been concerned about George Price in those days are now staid, settled down, peace-loving citizens. Mind you, it strikes me as being rather odd that Brockington's death should have occurred so soon after George was buried.
Poetic justice.
Even so, one is bound to look for a connection. Could it be that you chaps had something to do with it? Could it be that hate for Brockington had been kept smouldering like a peat bog fire? Could one of you have sought a belated revenge?
Well, don't you think there's a simple answer to that, Inspector? time of the shooting, we were all here, watching my play.
Of course. And since the play was based on the experiences common to the lot of you, it seemed a perfectly logical thing for you to do. I know that. Not only do I know it, but lots of other people know it too.
Small village.
Of course, but I have an inquisitive sort of mind. And frankly, I get quite a bit uneasy. I can check with Sergeant Maddock Price that Richard here left the Red Lion just before 8:15. I can check with Constable Ben Thomas that Bernard was coming to this little party, and the bus conductor confirmed that he got off the 8:10 bus. John's car was driven into the car park around about 8:10, and Gwyn got here at 8:15 in a hired car. Never do I remember so many facts so easy to check. Never do I remember a quiet little private party so well publicized. And never have I come across a group of fellows so concerned about being topped.
The play was on at 8:30.
And you all watched it rather keenly, I gather. John here could even give us the names of the songs that the fellows sang in the opening sequences.
Well, is it odd that we should take a special interest in Richard's plays?
Of course not. But here you are, all assembled at your little party. The facts are so well established that the doubting Thomas in me tells me it's all too good to be true. So what can a poor detective do? He must leave the important things and nose around with the trifling and inconsequent. For instance, I wonder why Albert should have chosen yesterday to return to Gwyn a plane he borrowed 6 months ago. There's nothing in that, except perhaps that Albert needed an excuse to call, maybe to have a chat over recent events. Albert says that Gwyn nagged him about the plane at your party, and if these two had this little friendly argument, then you other fellows would have overheard it. So, I asked Detective Sergeant Willis to make a few inquiries. John is the first man to put Albert in the clear. He remembers the argument quite well. There was just one little error, though. Sergeant Willis referred to the plane as a saw. But that was all right with John. Then, when Willis chats with Richard about the play, blow me down, he makes another mistake and calls it a hammer. But that was all right with Richard. He agrees it was a hammer. And then, when the tale is told to Bernard, the hammer becomes a spirit level. But what does it matter? Plane, hammer, spirit ever. Albert could have borrowed the lot. I'm only puzzled as to why people should want to tell lies about so unimportant a matter. Oh, I get finicky now. Not so much about the fiction as about the facts. They fit into too neat a pattern. Supposing I ask myself that one of these boys failed to arrive at the party on schedule, and supposing the rest of you knew why he was late. I have ample evidence of the time you all arrived in Gatley Dowell, but no witnesses to say what time you got into this room.
If I may butt in, Inspector, you have 5 such witnesses. We may not remember the times to a minute, but we were all here at 8:20.
And you would swear to that?
Obviously.
Yes, obviously. That's the kind of word that bothers me. Well, I don't have to make up my mind about things tonight. There's still some nosing around to do, and after all, suicide is not impossible. As John very wisely put it, a man doesn't have to hold a gun against his temple to shoot himself, and who knows, he may have had some reason for being careful about his own fingerprints. And what of the gun itself? A German Luger, a popular type of war souvenir. And although it's illegal to keep them, I'm sure there might be several of them in the village. This gun might just as well have been Brockington's as anybody else's. Don't you think so, Richard?
Why not, Inspector? Especially since, as you say, it had Brockington's initials on it.
Yes, I told you that, didn't I? Or did you tell me? But it's a good gun, Luger. I dare say it could be handled effectively by any man or woman. Oh, well, I must be on my way, gentlemen. Thanks for letting me talk to you. No iron bars a cage. This is the script, is it, John? I've never seen a script for a television play. Do you have to write in all the moves and the camera positions, Richard?
Well, only if they affect the development.
You make a shocking mess of the copy, don't you? Why all the doodling?
Well, that's me, I'm afraid. It's a habit of mine.
Mine, too. I wonder what the psychiatrist has to say about doodling. The moment when the mind wanders off the track or meets with an obstacle and the hands take over the activity. I see you have another beauty on page 26. Something really must have puzzled you there. Dissolve, says Richard. Doodle, 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 says John. Not that I noticed you turning the pages.
No.
But this doodle is unmistakably yours, I should say.
Yes, I've been reading the script.
Ah, that explains you knowing all the song titles. You're a dark horse, John. I think I'd like to read this myself, now that I've seen the play. May I borrow it, Richard?
Of course.
Unless you other chaps... or maybe you've all read it.
Oh, no, they couldn't have done. John said that he'd like to read the script.
Not before seeing the play, surely?
Oh, yes. Is that so odd, Inspector? We read a book, then see a film, listen to a radio talk, then read it in the listener.
Quite so, John, quite so. I would have thought... But it's a matter of taste, I suppose. Well, I really must go. Anyone coming my way, or would you prefer to hold an inquest?
I'll be glad of a lift, Inspector. We can't hold an inquest without a tragedy, and there doesn't seem to be one, does there?
As you say, brother. As you say.
I'll come along too, Inspector.
Good, yes.
Oh, I have my own car, thank you, Inspector. But I want to get home.
John?
Oh, my landlady's gone to a whist drive, so I'm a free man. I'm going to stay for half an hour or so, if Richard doesn't mind.
Of course.
Well, come on, gentlemen. Good night, you two.
I'll see you out.
Oh, thank you very much. It's quite a pleasant evening.
Yes, all right, okay. Yes, thank you. Good night. Oh, my God, I wouldn't call that a very comfortable chat. Pour one for me, will you, John?
I know you asked us to leave, Richard, but...
Oh, that's all right. I'm glad you stayed. Let me just make sure that he has gone off. Yes. Yes, he's gone all right.
Well, here you are.
Oh, thanks.
Well, he seems to be onto something, doesn't he?
Yes. Yes, he's cunning. Very charming, but cunning.
I could kick myself for doodling on that blasted script.
Yes, that was too bad, but I've made a much bigger blunder, John. Listen, there are two important things I have to tell you.
Well, what about the others?
Oh, this is only for you. I don't think we can risk having everybody know. Now, about my blunder, I realized it tonight when the inspector spoke about the Lugers. I thought it most fortunate that I had Brockington's gun. It fitted nicely into the plan, but we overlooked a most obvious and important fact. My gun must be in Brockington's place.
Good Lord.
Remember, I told you the guns got mixed up years ago, and I never bothered to change them.
But there's nothing on your gun to identify it as yours.
No, but it's another gun. If the police find it before we do, they'll wonder why Brockington should have two guns, and why one should be marked with his initials and the other not.
Oh, this is serious.
It's damn serious. And the other thing I have to tell you is even more so. This, too, arises out of something the inspector said. He said any man or woman could handle it.
Oh, he said that, yeah.
Well, was that as casual as it sounded? Or did he intend us to think that a woman might be involved?
Well, what if he does? We know it was a man's job.
Do we?
Well, good Lord, man, of course we do.
Listen, John. I drew the cross.
You?
I'm telling you this only because I have to. And there's a very special reason. You all left here one at a time, remember?
Mm-hmm.
And since I had drawn the cross, the gun would obviously be left in the glove box. I should have taken it out there and then, but, well, I was upset, very naturally concerned about the job I had to do. Matter of fact, I didn't even have the nerve to look at the thing. In any case, it was just as safe in the glove box as anywhere else.
Well?
Well, I got through my work the next day as best I could. And then, when Anne had gone home, I went to get the gun. It wasn't there.
Well, what did you do?
Well, what could I do? No one else knew that I'd drawn the cross. Whoever had taken the gun was pretty determined to do the job in spite of our plan. I felt pretty sick about passing the buck, but... well, I was quite helpless. How could I know which of you had taken the thing? Well, everything went off as arranged, except that the wrong man did the shooting. I felt he must have been damn determined, and until now I was prepared to let the thing stand.
And now?
And now another possibility creeps into the picture. Any man or woman could handle it.
Good God, you don't mean...
Yes, I do. Anne. There may be nothing at all in this, and I hope to goodness there isn't, but at least we must think about it. Just you and I. Anne wasn't involved in any oath. But she had more reason to hate Brockington than all the rest of us put together.
Oh, but this is quite ridiculous. A woman would never have the nerve. Besides, How could she have known anything about our plan?
Need she have known about it?
No. No, I suppose not. How could she have known where to find the gun?
She needn't have known that either. I never used that glove box in the hall. But how can I be sure that Anne doesn't? She could have gone there during the day. Gloves, handbag, lipstick, anything. Seeing the gun could have given her the idea.
No, I can't believe it.
Well, I'm not saying that I believe it, but someone took that gun.
But it's much more probable that one of us took it.
Certainly it is. I'm not trying to persuade you to believe that Anne took that gun. I hope to goodness she didn't. All I say is this. She now comes into the reckoning, and we've got to be damned careful.
Yes, I know what you mean. And you don't want to tell the others?
No, I think not.
Well, what's to be done?
The first job is to get back the other gun.
Break into the house and...
Well, what else?
The place will be guarded.
I shouldn't think so. Not at this stage. In any case, it's a risk I'll have to take. The suicide theory is rocking a bit even now. If the police find this other gun, it goes for a Burton.
Yes, I think you're right. Well, when do we meet?
I don't think there's any point in both of us going.
Well, I'll be the lookout. After midnight, I should say.
We'll make it 12:30.
So how do we get in?
That's something we'll have to find out.
Well, I think I could use another whiskey.
You all right, John? Yeah. Fine. Now then, I hope I remember the geography of this place. Yes, this must be the door. I hope to goodness it isn't locked. What's that? What? I thought I heard something. I don't think we're very good at this sort of thing. John, you hold the torch. Right. That's fine. Here we go. Close the door quietly, and I'll see if the curtains are properly drawn. Okay? Yes, I think so. Now then, we'll try all the drawers first, I should think. What if they're locked? Well, we'll try all the open ones before we start forcing anything. No, there's nothing in this one anyhow. Richard, somebody's in this room. Behind the curtains. What shall we do? Wait. I'll see who it is. Keep the light off me and off the curtains.
Put out that light, you fool.
Draw the curtains. Albert! What the hell are you doing here, Albert?
If you're sure those curtains are drawn tight, Richard, we can have the torch on again.
What's all this about, Albert?
I might ask you the same question.
You've got a little job to do.
I'm probably on the same job. You're looking for your own gun, aren't you, Richard?
Great minds think alike. When did this idea occur to you?
I thought of it quite suddenly when Probert was delivering his sermon. Isn't it odd how one can overlook the simplest things? If Richard had Brockington's gun, then Brockington must have Richard's.
So you came to get it?
I was afraid that the idea might not occur to anyone else, and there was no time for a consultation. If the police pick up this other gun, no suicide.
Well, let's find it and get out of here. Where have you looked, Albert?
I was nearly through with that cupboard.
Right, and you have your own torch?
Yeah.
Well, try not to disturb anything. John, keep the light on the bureau.
I've got it, boys. I've got it. Good. Let's go.
What a bit of luck. How did you find those curtains, Albert?
They were open. I drew them.
Right. Now then, boys, take it easy. Have a good look round to see that nothing is disturbed. And then we'll put out the torches and open the curtains.
Good evening, gentlemen. You looking for something? Put on the light, will you, Sergeant? I'm sure we'll be much more cozy if we can see each other. Ah, better. Sergeant Maddox Price, perhaps you'll stand by the door. You know Detective Sergeant Willis? But there, of course you do. Well, now then, gentlemen, it's not exactly usual for respectable men to call uninvited at this time of the night, especially when the householder is not in residence. But I'm sure you have a perfectly logical explanation for being here.
Have you, Inspector?
Oh, yes. I was waiting for you.
I'm sure you'll want to tell us the full story.
Certainly, Richard. I owe it to you. I find it so very frustrating to have strong feelings about a thing and have no facts to support them. So that when Detective Sergeant Willis found that gun in a drawer, I asked him to leave it there. You see, I had this feeling that somebody else might be interested in the weapon. So, in my little chat with you gentlemen, I mentioned the popularity of this particular sort of war souvenir.
And, of course, you have some sort of reason for all this, Inspector?
Certainly. I had a hunch that you chaps were concerned with Brockington's death. There was little proof in support of such a hunch, but there were one or two useful little pointers. John's knowledge of the script, for one thing. I wondered why John should have wanted to read your play before the transmission, Richard. He could have read it out of interest, of course, but on the other hand, he could have wanted to familiarize himself with the parts he might not see. The beginning, for instance. And not only John, there might have been other scripts and other readers. And that's what I suggest happened, gentlemen. One of you came late to your party. The problem is, which of you? Not that this matters as much as you may think. If, as I suspect, you are all involved in some sort of scheme, then the man who might have pulled the trigger is no more guilty than the rest. You are all accessories before the facts, which could make things rather uncomfortable.
Forgive my stupidity, Inspector, but I'm a little hazy on the simple question of proof. Your theory is quite romantic, if not very practical. I take it you have some sort of support for what you say?
My dear Richard, what better proof can I have than your nocturnal visiting? Dear me, I can congratulate myself. So also does Sergeant Willis. We spent hours searching for the usual clues, the print of the rubber heel, the lady's lipstick, the hairpin on the carpet, but we found nothing of interest. What have we now? 3 men all looking for a gun. Sure, your interest in the gun is quite easy to understand, isn't it? Brockington would have used his own gun if he wanted to shoot himself.
You don't think it possible that he should have had 2 guns?
Quite possible. But why, then, are you worried about the one you've just found? I think we're moving along very nicely, gentlemen. Indeed, I might even warn you at this stage that anything you say will be taken down and could be used in evidence. And I think I'd leave it at that for tonight.
You're not making any charge?
Not at the moment. I'm sure I can rely on your good sense not to leave Gatley Dowell or do anything silly. In the meantime, I shall make further inquiries.
What further inquiries?
Oh, come now, John. We found out a good deal, but we don't know the full story.
Then you can know it now. I shot him.
Really?
I'll make a full statement here and now. I shot Brockington.
I see. And you brought along your friend Richard tonight to help you recover some of the evidence.
If you like to put it like that.
Only to discover that Albert got here before you.
We were all in it, of course. We decided that Brockington had to be killed.
When did you decide this?
5 years ago.
Yes, I thought it might be something like that. Some silly oath, I suppose.
Not necessarily silly.
So you 5 fellows agreed to do this together? No one else involved?
Of course not. Well, obviously not.
Don't get too enthusiastic, John. Overemphasis always makes me suspicious.
Well, the only thing that matters now is that I did the job.
You mean you were chosen to do it?
Put it that way if you wish.
What of the 2 guns?
Well, they were accidentally exchanged some years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Brockington had carved his initials on his own gun, so it was the perfect weapon. I was given this gun, or rather I took it. I came along here and found him watching the television. I put the muzzle as near as I could to his temple, and I pulled the trigger.
And then you placed the gun in the dead man's hand and went along to join the party.
Yes.
And the other members of the party knowing what you'd done?
No.
No?
No, we drew lots. No one was to know who did the shooting. I was the unlucky one.
So you were all late for the play, is that it?
Half an hour late.
So you came here to shoot Brockington with his own gun?
Yes.
A gun which could easily have been identified as his. The initials WB carved on the butt.
That's right.
Then I wonder who could have rubbed off those carved initials. Sergeant Willis, the gun, if you please.
Yes, sir.
This is the gun which killed Brockington. No initials.
I can explain that.
You mean you thought of another story?
No, I got confused. Well, who wouldn't be? When I got home from the party, I put the gun away in the same drawer as my own gun. I must have got them mixed up.
So you got a Luger, too?
We all had one.
And you accidentally changed your gun for Brockington's and brought the wrong one here to shoot him?
Yes.
Fair enough. Then you will be able to bring me Brockington's gun in the morning.
Well, yes, certainly.
Whom are you protecting, John?
No one. I shot him myself.
Then where is Brockington's gun?
Here it is.
Well, another visitor. Don't close the door, Sergeant Price. We never know who's going to call. Come in, Bernard, come in. My speech on the popularity of Lugos must have been most effective. Put it on the table, Bernard. We have quite a collection. Very well, Bernard. Your turn. You shot Brockington, did you?
No, he committed suicide.
That brings us back to where we started. Go on.
Well, you've heard most of the story. We drew lots. But I was unlucky. I wanted to draw that cross, and I didn't. I hated the swine. So on my way out from the party, I took the gun. The letters are there, plain enough for you to see. W.B. I wanted the privilege of pulling the trigger. I came in at the time arranged. But when I got to this room, Brockington was lying on the floor with a gun in his hand. I could see that he was dead.
You swear to that?
Yes.
But that doesn't affect my story. I came here before Bernie.
And shot your victim with a gun that Bernie carried.
No, with my own gun.
You're getting awfully mixed up, John. Bernard here I can believe because he produces the evidence. Bernard has a sound story. I can accept it. Up to a point. There's just one little detail I cannot accept. I happen to believe that Brockington was murdered.
And I tell you that I shot him. What more do you...
I don't believe you, John. And I repeat my question. Whom do you think you're protecting? If this is to be your attitude, I shall have to ask myself the very obvious question. Who else had reason to hate Brockington?
Meaning George's widow, I suppose.
You're very fond of Anne, aren't you, John? And why shouldn't you be? She's a very charming girl. Why shouldn't you protect her if you feel that she needs?
Anne is in no way involved. All my friends here will agree that we planned this thing.
And a very clever plan it was. Sergeant Willis and I are very proud to have discovered the truth of it. But it didn't work out, did it? Neither of you killed him, and we shall have to look elsewhere.
There's no need to argue about this anymore. Perhaps you'll allow me to say a word, Inspector?
By all means, Sergeant Price. I always think that the local officer...
That there gun on the table, the one you found in Brockington's hand, belongs to me.
Hmm?
It was one of the few things that George brought back with him. I borrowed it for a moment.
Now, just a moment, Sergeant.
Inspector, you stay where you are for a few minutes, will you please? I don't fancy a lifetime in jail. Stay where you are, Sergeant Willis. I don't want to use this on anyone but myself, so don't tempt me.
Now, Maddox, listen to me for a minute, will you?
One thing I'm sorry about, Inspector, that this should have happened when I'm still in the force. If I'd retired when my time was up as Anne wanted me to, I'd feel a lot happier. As for the other thing, believe me, Inspector, I have no regrets. I always knew I would do it if George died before me, and I had no trouble at all to make up my mind when the time came. Of course, I didn't know about what Mr. Dukes and the others were planning, and let me tell you, Inspector, it warmed my heart to hear about it. Thank you, gentlemen, but it was my job, see? Now, if you'll just give me a minute...
Now, don't be a fool, Maddox. Let's look after you and take you to trial. You're only one of the accessories, and you can plead the strongest possible provocation.
I think I know what's best.
You don't think we'd leave a loaded gun around, do you, Sergeant? Here's the clip.
Not loaded?
Take him down to the station, Willis. P.C. Bowen is outside, and he'll come with you. He can make a statement, but I'd like to check it before we charge him.
Yes, sir. Come along, Sergeant.
Willis.
Yes, sir?
Take good care of him.
I will, sir.
Well, good night, gentlemen, and thank you again.
We'll be seeing you, Maddox. Don't you worry. We're all in this together.
Good night.
Well, quite a night. I don't think I need you any further, gentlemen.
Good night, Good night, Inspector.
Good night. Life isn't as tidy as one of your plays, Richard.
No. No, it isn't, is it? Poor old Maddox.
Poor old Maddox, indeed. You got your car?
No.
Well, it's a nice night for a stroll.
You have been listening to Murder on the Agenda by Einan Evans. The part of Richard Dukes was played by Hugh David, Sergeant Maddox Price, Norman Wynne, John Griffiths by Richard Bebb. Anne Price by Margaret John. Bernard Howells by John Darren. Albert Thomas by Charles Morgan. Mattie Thomas by Madge Jones. Gwyn Harries by Henley Thomas. Inspector Enoch Probert, Inan Evans. Jean by Anita Morgan. P.C. Willis, Brenda Jenkins. Josh by George David. And the Vicar, Dilwyn Owen. Other voices heard were those of Yeyan Rhys Williams and D.L. Davies. The programme, which was recorded, was produced by John Griffiths.
Marnie by Winston Graham. Dramatised for radio by Sean McKenna. With Jade Williams and Patrick Kennedy.
The name is important. It has to be neither too ordinary nor too unusual. Just a name, like a face, that'll go along with the crowd. Marion Holland stole £1,100 from Crombie and Strutt in Birmingham. Molly Jeffrey got away with 900 from the Gaumont in Manchester. And Peggy Nicholson helped herself to 700 in Newcastle. The Christian name has to be like my own, too, or I might not answer when called, and that can be awkward. You never think of your own family as peculiar, do you? I paid the rent on the house Mother shared with Lucy Nye in Torquay. I can't remember a time Lucy wasn't there, with her tea leaves and her funny ways.
Marnie, dear.
Hello, Lucy.
I said you'd be coming. Had one of me dreams. Don't you look a picture? Like a film star. Who is it?
Hello, Mother.
Didn't I tell you? My dreams never lie.
This is a Christian household. Nobody wants to hear about your silly fancies. Make us some tea, Lucy. Marnie's come a long way.
All right.
Lord knows how long it'll take her. Coming out of the draft, Marnie. We never get a gleam of sunshine on this side of the avenue.
Here, 150. That should keep you going for a while.
You're a good girl. There's a house in Seymour Avenue for rent. Dearer than this, but it gets the sun. It's a better part of Torquay, of course.
The rent here is paid up till July.
I suppose it depends what you like to see your mother in. That blouse you're wearing, French silk, isn't it?
I got it in a sale.
I hope you're not extravagant. The Bible says the love of money is the root of all evil. Many's the sermon your granddad preached on that subject.
It also says money answereth all things.
I don't think I like your hair that colour. Blonde hair looks as though you're trying to attract men.
Here we are, nice and strong. You look a bit peaky, dear. I hope Mr. Pemberton isn't working you too hard. Only I dreamed you were in trouble.
Why would she be in trouble? Private secretary to a millionaire who treats her like his daughter.
Travelling all over. You must see more of Mr. Pemberton than his wife does.
I'm not in trouble. And there's nothing wrong between Mr. Pemberton and me. I'm his secretary.
Marnie's not like that. I brought her up properly.
Mr. Pemberton, my fictional boss, explained me being away a lot, why I'd paid for elocution lessons and why I was flush when I came home. I might say Marion, Molly and Peggy stole the money to look after Mother, but it wasn't as simple as that. I liked nice things too. When you've been really poor, it leaves a mark. And of course, there was Forio.
There, my darling. Have you missed me? Marnie's here.
The moment I laid eyes on Forio, I knew he had to be mine. At the Cheltenham races, Forio won his race, but he was injured in the last few yards. I couldn't let them put him down. I boarded him at Garrett's Farm, near Cirencester. The cost was awful, but when I rode him, I felt free.
Go on, Forio! Go!
The job I went after this time was an assistant cashier's position with a firm of printers in Barnet, Rutland & Co. I was interviewed by 2 of the directors, both quite young.
We're a family firm, Mrs. Taylor, and we want our staff to feel like family.
Terry Holbrook had a touch of the Troy Donahues about him. He knew it too.
Tell us about yourself.
I'm Mary Taylor. My husband died last year. We were living in Cardiff, but I'm from the East Coast originally. I didn't work while I was married, but after he died, Is something the matter? Mr. Rutland, is it?
No. Why? You're staring at her, Mark. Do forgive my cousin, Mrs. Taylor. He thinks he's Heathcliff.
That's nonsense. I apologise if I've made you uncomfortable, Mrs. Taylor.
You haven't.
Good. I'm glad.
But he had. I don't know why. They offered me the job on the spot. There's a place in Plymouth where you can buy blank insurance cards, and references are never hard to fix. I started the next Monday. 3 weeks later, I found myself at the firm's annual dance. You don't always do the clever thing, do you?
Oh, do you think Mark Rutland's like Lawrence Harvey? Oh, I bet he looked marvellous in uniform.
Was he in the army then?
Navy, till his dad died and he joined the firm. Quite put Terry Holbrook's nose out of joint. They're always at each other's throats. Look out! He's coming over.
Perhaps he'll ask you to dance.
It's Dennis from sales watching. He'll spit tax. Hello, Mr. Holbrook.
Oh, yes, hello. It's Dawn, isn't it?
That's right, from accounts.
Mrs. Taylor, would you care to dance?
Oh.
I haven't really welcomed you to Rutland. It's Mary, am I right?
Mrs. Taylor. And I'm afraid I don't dance.
I'm sure you're being modest.
I can dance, but I don't.
Her husband.
Of course. There's a lot you must miss about being married. I know I do. Perhaps you play cards. I have card parties most Saturdays. My more adventurous friends enjoy them. You'd be very welcome.
I don't gamble.
You might enjoy yourself.
Please, don't touch my arm, Mr. Holbrook.
Most women don't consider it an insult to be thought madly attractive.
I mean no offence. I'm simply not interested.
I see. Well, enjoy your evening.
Well, that told him.
That was that, I thought. A difficulty avoided. I didn't speak to the other director, Mark Rutland, until the day I went to his house with some proofs to be checked. He'd had an accident and had hurt his foot.
I'm sorry to send for you like this on such a dreadful day. Do excuse the TV, I was just watching a race.
It's Kempton Park, isn't it?
Are you keen on racing?
I love it.
Really? Me too. Do you often go?
When I can. Not often. My husband was fond of it.
Ah, yes, of course. I'm sorry for your loss. One hears a lot about how one should deal with these things, but in reality it's a new page, isn't it? Absolutely new. My late wife hated racing.
Cover the mirrors, dear. If you see the lightning in them, you'll see the devil peering out at you.
Are you all right, Mrs. Taylor?
Would you mind turning off the TV? The lightning. I'm sorry. Thunderstorms always put me in a panic.
The chances of being struck by lightning are really awfully small.
I know that. I know all the answers. It doesn't help.
I wonder... Please don't misinterpret me, but I'm going to Newmarket on the 23rd. Would you like to come?
I suppose I thought it wouldn't matter. I'd already chosen the day Mary Taylor would leave Rutland's.
What do you fancy for the 3 o'clock?
Telepathy.
Really?
I saw her being trained as a 1-year-old. She's come in second twice in the last month over longer distances. She should do well today.
You do know your stuff. I'll put a $5 on her. Shall I put something on for you?
No, thank you. I don't bet.
Why not?
I'm afraid of losing the money, I suppose. There wasn't much where I came from.
If you don't bet, why do you like the races?
The horses.
Ah. Do you ride?
Not as much as I'd like.
Oh, Lord, come away. These teddy boys are making a nuisance themselves.
Them? They're not true Teds. Just rough types following a fashion. That's all it is. Just as it's the fashion for men like you to wear a jacket with slanted pockets.
Men like me don't gang together and make a scene.
You've been brought up to know better. In a decent home. You should see some of their homes. They're not bad. Not really. They just have no prospects. This is all their lives will ever be. Wouldn't that make you kick off a bit?
You're full of surprises, Mary. I hope you're enjoying today as much as I am.
I had a little brother once. Mum had him in 1943 when I was 6. He died at birth. We were poor and there was no health service then. Mother was never the same afterwards.
Dr. Gascoigne did something terrible to my insides. The pain, Marnie. That's all any man brings you. Pain and blood and shame.
Since her health got bad, I'd never given her less than 400 a year. I could get enough from Rutland's to keep us both for 18 months.
A whole week in Ramsgate. Fancy! We stayed in Margate last year, but Ramsgate's a cut above.
I'm sure you'll have a lovely time, Dawn.
You're not worried about doing the pay packets, are you?
Not at all.
Mr. Ward will fetch the cash from the bank on Thursday afternoon. You just put the right amount in each pay packet ready to be collected on Friday. Oh, and you'll have to open Mr. Holbrook's post while I'm gone. But don't open anything marked personal. It gets ever so shirty.
But Terry Holbrook's personal letters, I quickly discovered, were boring things about shares and equities. That Thursday, Mr. Ward brought me £1,300 in cash. I'd spent a few evenings beforehand cutting up paper into banknote-sized pieces. I put those in the pay packets and the real money in my handbag. You can get a lot of cash in a normal-sized handbag if it's empty to begin with.
You sure I can't interest you in a card party on Saturday, Mary?
Quite sure, Mr. Holbrook. Thank you for asking. From then on, I had it down to a T. Home, a gin and French, then a hot bath. Then I put on new clothes, so when I walked out of that bedsit, I left Mary Taylor behind. I took a tube to Paddington, then a train to Wolverhampton. Mary's trail had to peter out, you see. I went to Swindon and paid some money into an account I kept there using the night safe. I reached Cirencester by Sunday lunchtime. That's my beauty. My lovely Forio. He was restless. I didn't think they'd been exercising him enough. I wanted to have it out with Mr. Garrett, so I went straight over to the farm.
Good ride, Miss Elmer. There's a gentleman asking for you.
A gentleman? What gentleman?
That would be me.
I didn't move. I couldn't. I felt too sick.
I have my car here. Perhaps I could give you a lift home.
How did you find me?
That doesn't really matter, does it? Margaret Elmer. That's how you're known here. Is it your real name?
All I can say is I'm terribly sorry.
Let's skip the emotional scene, shall we? Where's the money?
Some of it's in my suitcase. The rest is safe enough. If you turn me over to the police, I shan't tell you where. But if you promise not to, I'll return every penny.
Do you think you're in any position to strike bargains? Answer my questions. Where do you come from?
Plymouth.
You told Rutland's Cardiff.
That was Mary Taylor.
Are your parents still alive?
My father was killed in the war. He was in the Navy. Like you, Mark. My mother died soon after. I was brought up by a family friend called Lucy Nye. What I told him had bits of truth in it. I said Lucy was dead too, that I'd inherited her house, sold it to buy Forio, and changed my name to get a new start. I never meant to steal from Rutland's, but once I realised I could,
I was swept along by the idea.
It took time to cut up the paper, hardly a spur-of-the-moment thing.
I got carried away. I've been poor, Mark. Poorer than you could ever understand. You never forget what that's like. And when you suddenly find yourself holding £1,000 in notes... I'm not wicked, Mark. Just weak. And it's hardly as if I could come back, is it?
Why not?
Well, you. How could I face you again? The way I felt about you. The way I thought you'd started to feel about me.
Go on, Rutland. Bite.
Nothing could ever have come of it. You're pretty much out of the top drawer. I'm something sucked up by the vacuum cleaner. Just hand me over to the police, Mark, and have done.
Don't worry, you're not in jail yet, Margaret.
People call me Marnie. Where are you taking me?
I told you. Home. My home.
What then?
Tomorrow's Monday. You'll go to work, as usual.
At Rutland's? Don't joke.
Nothing's wrong at Rutland's. Nobody knows what you did. I'd promised one of the lads a bonus. I forgot to tell you, so first thing Friday morning I went to your office. You weren't there. As soon as I opened his wage packet, I saw what you'd done. I sat and thought about it for a good while. Then I went to the bank, drew £1,000 from my personal account and put everything right.
Why?
Terry Holbrook always said you were too good to be true. I didn't want to hear him say I told you so. And you're right, Marnie. I do have feelings for you.
I didn't dare hope. But it's too late now.
Doesn't that rather remain to be seen?
Mark, I'm no good. I'm a thief. Forgive me if you can. And let me go.
I can't do that, I'm afraid. I'm in love with you.
Love's built on trust. You can't possibly trust me.
Love grows where it grows. What it builds on is anyone's guess. I followed you halfway across England. Do you think I'm going to lose you now?
How did you find me?
I'll tell you on our honeymoon.
He had me cornered. If I said no, he'd go straight to the police and I'd go to prison. I had to stop Mark looking any further. So, I went back to Rutland's. And when, a couple of weeks later, Mark threw a small engagement party, I smiled and went along with it. Mark told me he loved me, again and again. I hated him for it.
Well, well, quite the dark horse, Marnie. It is Marnie. Is it so hard to keep up?
It's a nickname. I was christened Margaret Elmer.
As many names as there are stars in heaven.
You do like to talk in riddles, Terry. It doesn't amuse me. I doubt it amuses anyone.
I wouldn't have thought Mark was your style, my dear. Too straightforward. I'd have expected you to go for someone with dark corners and hidden crannies.
I find Mark quite surprising enough, thanks.
The bloom will soon wear off, Marnie. I wouldn't bet on it surviving the honeymoon. I'll be waiting for your phone call.
We went to Mallorca. Mark had booked us a beautiful room in a hotel right on the town square.
Funny how much better Rioja tastes here.
Please, Mark. You're breathing down my neck. So, you promised to tell me how you found me.
It's now quite the moment.
On our honeymoon, you said. You promised.
It was telepathy.
There's no such thing.
That day at Newmarket, you suggested we back a horse called Telepathy. You said you'd seen her training as a 1-year-old. I looked her up, who she belonged to, who trained her, where. I followed my nose and it led me to Cirencester. Garrett's was the third stables I tried. I'd almost given up hope, and then you rode up the lane on Forio.
So, if I hadn't told you about that horse, you'd never have found me.
What a good thing you did. Kiss me, Mrs. Rutland.
No, Mark.
Don't be shy.
I mean it.
Marnie.
I'm sorry, I can't. Please, don't touch me.
Darling, are you afraid? I'll be very gentle.
I can't stand it, Mark.
I understand. It's unfamiliar. You need time. I can wait, Marnie. I want you to be happy.
All through the next few days, Mark was kind and thoughtful, good company even. But every time I met his eyes, that was there, like a bailiff at the door. On the Thursday, there was a fiesta in the square. We watched from our balcony.
What's funny?
Those lads, trying to get the girls to talk to them. All that posturing and giggling.
And all they want is something that's over in 5 minutes.
If I showed you a new accounting system, a better way to keep the books, would you try it?
I expect so.
Have you been to a Spanish fiesta before?
No,
Do you like it?
very much.
Would someone telling you about it be the same thing?
Of course not.
Then don't let yourself be told about love.
It's not what I've been told. It's what I feel.
You can't feel anything about an experience you haven't known. You haven't, have you?
Of course not. I haven't any memories of that sort.
Then for God's sake, help me make some.
Do you insist?
You're my wife, Marnie. You made vows.
So, time up. No more excuses.
That wasn't pleasant for either of us, I'm sorry. A man wants his wife to join him, not submit to him.
I didn't submit. You forced me.
I wanted you very much. I thought you'd... I love you, Marnie.
Well, I don't love you.
Then why did you marry me?
To stay out of jail. Why else? If I hadn't, you'd have gone to the police.
You should have thought it through more carefully. I covered up for you. Legally, no crime was committed. It would only ever have been my word against yours.
Oh God. I need some air. Oh, that damn fiesta.
We'll work through this, Marnie. We'll be happy.
I don't see how.
I looked down at the square below, thronging with people. How far down was it? 20 feet? More? Was that far enough? It was a risk worth taking.
Oh, no, you don't.
Oh, why won't you let me?
You're 23 years old, Marnie. You're clever and you're beautiful. Dying is the last thing you should want.
Oh, I've got nothing now.
You have me!
And that, of course, was the trouble. When we got home, Mark and I had separate rooms. After a few weeks, I began to relax. In the garage, I found an old two-seater which Mark said I could drive. I didn't dare risk the journey to Torquay. I couldn't do there and back in a day. I started to fret. Mother would need more money quite soon. I never, for a moment, dreamed that Terry Holbrook would be my guardian angel.
Hello?
I thought I might persuade you to change your mind about my party. You've no idea what I'm talking about, have you? I'm having some friends over on Saturday. I invited you both, but Mark gave me a very firm no. As if his new bride could possibly be corrupted by a few drinks and a little game of cards.
I don't play poker, Terry.
Oh, it's easy to learn. I'll teach you.
Mark wouldn't approve.
Wouldn't that add a certain frisson? You're very welcome to come by yourself. You'll be a natural, my dear.
If I come, and I mean if, will you promise not to flirt with me?
Of course not.
I told Mark I was going out with Dawn. I said her mother was ill and she needed support. He didn't object. Terry showed me the basics of poker. I played a couple of hands and I watched very carefully. The second week, I made £6. The third week, I was down 32 and 6. But the week after that, £12 clear. Terry was right. I was a natural.
There's only one thing wrong with your game, Marnie. Knowing when your luck has run out. It's like being aware of a gentle breeze. If it blows with me, I know that with reasonable cards I'll make money. And with good cards, I'll make quite a lot. But if it blows against me, I cut my cloth accordingly.
I'll bear it in mind.
Have another drink.
Nice try, Terry. I'll see you next week.
A whole week. An empty desert stretching ahead.
I've had an idea. We could turn the old garage into a stable. You could keep Forio here.
Do you mean it?
We could ride to hounds, join the thorn hunt. You'd like that, wouldn't you?
You know I would.
Then, let's make a deal.
What sort of deal?
I bumped into an old friend of my father's last week, a chap named Charles Roman. He's very gentle, very wise. He's a psychiatrist.
You want me to see a psychiatrist? I don't like sex, so I must be sick in the head.
Seeing a psychiatrist doesn't mean you're sick in the head. A great many people do it these days.
I won't agree to it. Why should I?
I'd very much like you to be able to enjoy something pleasurable and important.
Something you consider pleasurable and important.
Something most people do. Marnie, I need to know if it's love you can't stand or just me. Roman might help.
People think I'm lucky. To be married to a man who's upright and straightforward. They've no idea of the twists and turns in you.
I am straightforward, Marnie. I love you and I want you to be happy. Having Forio here will make you happy, won't it?
And of course he was right. The day the horse box pulled up on the drive, I felt my heart lift and swell.
Oh, my boy. Forio.
I'd controlled myself all my life. I could hold my own with Charles Roman for 2 hours a week.
Do make yourself comfortable.
You should know that I'm only coming here because my husband wants me to. I don't like sex, you see. He thinks you can cure me.
I can do very little without your cooperation. Perhaps we could start by your giving me the general factual background to your life.
I told him the same story I'd told Mark. It sounded so straightforward I believed it myself. But I soon learned not to underrate Roman. You could imagine you were doing awfully well when you weren't, at all. Over the next few sessions, he started his mind games.
What does the word rain suggest to you?
It's always raining when I come here. My umbrella leaks a pool in your hat stand.
Water.
Kettles. Hot baths. Sometimes I have 2 or 3 a day. Soap, plugs, water, Baptists. Blood, tears, toil.
Baptists?
And his tears shall wash away thy sins. My mother took me to chapel 3 times every Sunday.
When you were so young?
Careful, Marnie.
Lucy Nye was just as bad after Mother died.
Do you love your husband?
Of course.
What does love mean to you?
Forio knowing my step. Warmth. Big arms round me. A kitchen with a fire burning. God so loved the world.
And sex?
Whatever I say, you'll twist it to fit your theories. I won't be thought of as a freak at a sideshow because I have likes and dislikes and stick to them.
Apart from not wanting your husband, are you happy in other ways?
Why shouldn't I be?
I wonder if you sometimes slightly pride yourself on being withdrawn from life. As if you've grown a protective skin. There's a risk it will harden until the real you inside shrivels and dies.
And you think talking is going to help?
It might. If you can stop being so frightened of what you're going to say.
Forio's looking very handsome.
I want him to look his best for the hunt. Have you got a mount yet?
Rex Newton-Smith's lending me a hack. We're dining with them the evening before, by the way.
All right.
I can't promise it'll be as exciting as one of Terry Holbrook's poker parties.
Have you been having me followed?
I happened to ask Dawn how her mother was. She hasn't been ill at all. Wasn't hard to find out the rest.
Why shouldn't I go to Terry's parties if I want to?
Why lie to me?
I thought you'd disapprove.
I do. Everything Terry Holbrook touches turns sour. He's behind all the trouble at Rutland's.
What trouble?
The takeover bit, I told you about it.
I can't have been listening.
Or perhaps you've been conspiring with Terry behind my back. Has he asked you to find anything, papers, anything like that?
Don't be ridiculous. I don't have the slightest interest in Rutland.
I won't have it, Marnie.
You're hurting me.
I put up with our current situation, and I'll keep on doing so, but the bargain doesn't include your spending time with Terry Holbrook.
Let go of my arm. That's going to bruise.
I'm sorry.
Is this why you're home early? To shout at me?
I didn't plan to shout. I have to go to Liverpool on business, shareholders to pacify. I'll be back late tomorrow. Promise me you won't see Terry Holbrook while I'm gone.
It was an easy promise to make. I had somewhere much better to go.
Not as much as usual.
I'll be able to top it up very soon.
You're in a queer mood today.
Do you have a photo of Dad?
There's one in my treasure bag. It's in the sideboard, bottom right hand. Why'd you want a photo all of a sudden?
When he died, who told me?
I did, I expect.
I don't remember.
Well, you were only 6. I don't suppose you remember much.
I remember Dad's arms. Strong arms. Holding me tight. Keeping me safe.
Yes. That was Frank.
Is this it?
Give it here. There. Funny. He stayed young and I've got old. There's a cutting from the paper in here somewhere. I cut it out to keep. There.
Deaths on active service. Frank William Elmer, HMS Cranbrook, on June the 10th, 1943, aged 41.
All I had left.
Can I have the photo?
If you take care of it.
It was Lucy who told me Dad was dead, wasn't it?
It's a long time ago.
I had a picture book with an elephant on. When Lucy told me, I put my head down on it and cried. The tears made the colour run till it looked like I'd been crying blood. I knew that day I'd never have complete protection or shelter or love again.
What's the matter with you today?
I sometimes think I'm different to other girls.
Be thankful you are. Painting their toenails, flying after men. You're my good girl. My clever girl.
I'm not sure it's always wise to be clever.
What does the word childbirth mean to you?
That damn clock striking 11.
What clock?
In Mother's kitchen. It was Granny's. Boiling water. Oh, we need more blankets.
Were you cold?
Oh, I was warm as warm. Always. Till that tapping at the window. Why does Daddy tap at the window? Why doesn't he come the ordinary way? Why do I have to be turned out of Mother's bed?
What's happening to you?
I'm being lifted out of my warm bed and carried to a cold one.
And somebody is tapping?
The tapping's before. Always before. Sometimes it's a nail, and sometimes it's a knuckle. The clock strikes 11. There's tapping at the window. I'm lifted out of my warm bed, and the door's shut. Noises in there. Mother's being tortured, and in a minute, the door will open, and the one who's torturing Mother will come in here and do it to me. Oh, God, help me.
Now what's happening?
The door handle's turning. I'm in my nightie. I'm pressing against the wall and watching the door open wider and wider.
Is someone there?
Mother. It's Mother. It's going to be all right now.
And is it all right?
She's coming in. Mother? No. It's not Mother. It's someone who looks like her. Her hair's in tails like a witch. She's carrying something. She's holding it out to me, and I don't want it. I don't want it. Take it away! I have to leave.
Mrs. Rutland.
No, I have to go.
It wasn't a memory. How could it be? And now I couldn't go back to Roman. Ever. I'd think of something to tell Mark, but there was no time now. I had to repair my face for dinner with the Newton Smiths.
Good evening. Oh, Marnie, don't you look glamorous?
Terry, I wasn't expecting you.
Yeah, someone's ill. I'm making up the numbers. Now, who don't you know?
For a moment, I thought I would be sick. Right there, where I stood.
Mr. Strutt. Allow me to introduce Mark Rutland.
How do you do?
And his charming new wife.
Hello.
We've met before, haven't we?
I don't think so.
In Birmingham. 2 years ago. I don't think you were Mrs. Rutland then, were you? You were Marion Holland.
I'm afraid you're making a mistake.
The Marion Holland who was employed by my firm, Crombie and Strutt, as a confidential clerk between September 1958 and February 1959.
My maiden name was Elmer. At the time you mention, I was living with my late husband in Cardiff.
I don't know what's worrying you about the resemblance between my wife and this Miss Holland, is it? I assure you it can only be a resemblance. I knew my wife in Cardiff before we were married. I've known her ever since.
Really, Mark? I never knew that.
Well, I'm jiggered. I've never seen such a resemblance, really. Marion Holland was a redhead, but you know how women change their hair. I'm so sorry, Mrs. Rutland. It seems I've made rather a fool of myself. We should go in.
Saved by the God. Fancy you two knowing each other all this time, even while Estelle was still alive, eh, Mark?
Let's go in. Say something.
Thank you for covering for me. Are you very angry?
I'm not angry. I'm knocked for 6. I don't like the idea of my wife going to prison.
Why would I?
Did you think I wouldn't ask Strutt about it? £1,100, Marnie. Less than you took from Rutland's, admittedly. Did Marion get swept away by the idea then, too?
I never wanted you to know.
I can believe that. Mary Taylor, Marion Holland, any more?
2. I told you I was a thief and a liar. I said forgive me and let me go. You wouldn't.
So it's my fault?
I didn't say that.
No, you're right. I checked some of what you told me and took the rest on trust. I was in love with you. Trust has to begin somewhere. Well, this time I need to know it all.
We talked till dawn. I told him about everything. Except Mother. I'd rather have died than have her find out I hadn't lived up to Grandad's standards.
You can't ignore the fact you're wanted by the police in 3 separate cities.
I'm not wanted. Marion Holland is. And Peggy Nicholson and Molly Jeffrey.
You're in danger every time we meet someone new, and now I've lied for you. I'm an accessory.
Let me go. I'll disappear. People will forget.
Listen, Marnie. What if I go privately to the 3 firms you stole from? Offer to pay back all the money if they drop the charges. You'd have to keep seeing Roman, of course, but...
I'd be completely under your control.
We'd be clearing out the past, finding a future together. I really want us to have a future together.
You make it sound reasonable.
Being honest is reasonable. Trusting people is reasonable. I'm asking you to trust me.
We'd better get changed. We have to be at the meet by 7.
We're still going hunting.
Forio's been looking forward to it.
The meet was in the grounds of a big house called Thornhill. The mount Rex had found for Mark was pretty temperamental, so I steered Forio away from him.
Good crowd. More than I expected. They found. Shall we ride together?
I don't think you'll be able to keep up. Go on!
And he wasn't. Before long, we were heading full pelt downhill, out into the open. My eyes watery with the speed. Forio was white-flecked, and his flanks were heaving. I gave him the whip to hurry him forward.
Marnie! Marnie, be careful!
On, Forio! On!
You don't need a man. You don't want one.
The skin will harden.
You're in danger.
It's the devil peering out at you.
I won't be control. I won't be control.
Every time we meet someone new.
Until the real you inside shrivels and dies.
Who's tapping? Why is Daddy tapping?
My good girl. My clever girl.
And suddenly, it wasn't the fox the hounds were baying for. It was me. And I could gallop and twist and turn. But I could never get away from them. And I'd never be given a chance to explain. Because I was guilty. And this is what I deserved. And then there was a wall. And a ditch and a gully and... Mark took the wall right behind us. And he didn't ride well. He never had. And suddenly, we were all down, all floundering in the leaves and muck. Forio was trying to get up, trying so hard, but he couldn't. The bone was sticking out through his skin. His cries were... And Mark lay face down in the wet mud, not moving. And I knew I had to do something, that there was only time to help one of them.
Someone! Please! Someone help my husband!
Forio had to be shot. Mark was taken to hospital with a concussion. All I had was stiffness and some bruises. If God exists, he has a strange sense of humour.
How long have you been sitting there? You should have woken me. I'm so sorry about Forio.
What happens when a horse is shot, Mark? Do they bury it? I couldn't bear to think of it being sold for...
I don't think there's much likelihood. I need to tell you something. I'm not going to fight the takeover bid at Rutland's. I'm going to sell my shares and walk away.
If you think that's right.
I want a clean start, Marnie. For me and for us. Nothing's happened that we can't put right with some courage and some love. If we're together. I hope you believe that.
Even on his sickbed, he wouldn't let go. I didn't have to answer, because the nurse came and told him to rest. I drove to the travel agency in the High Street and booked a ferry passage to St. Malo for 2 days' time. Let Mark make his clean start. He'd do it better without me. I drove home to pack a suitcase. Terry Holbrook was waiting on the doorstep.
You know Mark sold out of Rutland's.
He mentioned it.
Oh, look at you. Butter wouldn't melt. All those clever little visits to my poker parties. Those times way back when you opened my personal correspondence. I knew you were bogus, Marnie, but I didn't think you were a spy.
How am I a spy?
I had a good plan. Mark and I couldn't keep on fighting over Rutland's. One of us had to have control. I'm a better businessman than Mark, I talked up the company, went to a merchant bank, got them to buy up stock, even talked one of the sleeping partners into selling out, so that with the bank's support I could be MD.
I don't care about this, Terry.
But now Mark sold his shares too. The bank has the controlling interest. An hour ago they phoned me to tell me the name of the new managing director, and it isn't me.
Was there no gentle breeze to warn you?
Give Mark a message. Tell him I'm going to get him back.
Visiting hour is 6 till 7. Tell him yourself. I tried to write Mark a note, but nothing worth putting down would come. Oh well. Best, in the end, if he thought the worst of me. I found his keys and drove to Rutland's. I didn't think there'd be much in the safe, but there was over £600. I sat in that darkened office, by that safe, and I started to shake. I knew it meant something, but I didn't know what. I put the money back. Don't ask me why, but I couldn't steal anything else from Mark. I got in the car and drove like all the devils in hell were after me. The SOS came on after the news.
Would Margaret Elmer, known as Marnie, last heard of working for a businessman named Pemberton, please contact her mother in Torquay, who is dangerously ill.
Oh, thank the Lord. We was looking for you everywhere.
Is she upstairs? How is she?
She's gone, Marnie. A stroke. Yesterday, before they even put out the SOS.
I don't understand.
She's dead, dear. I'm sorry. The funeral's tomorrow.
Lucy gave me Mother's old handbag. There was a photo of me at 18 and some old newspaper clippings. The one I'd seen about Dad's death. An announcement of my birth, her wedding card, and an old dance programme clipped to it. Then another cutting, dated 1943. Lucy, what's this?
Oh, dear.
The headline said, Plymouth woman bound over on murder charge. I thought it must be someone Mother knew, until I saw her name. Mrs. Edith Elmer, charged with the murder of her newborn child.
Your mam was a lovely girl, dear. Boys always round her, but she kept herself pure. Had to. Your granddad was that fierce, like something out of the Old Testament. We was all scared of him, and your poor mother, well, she was 33 by the time he died. Oh, she loved your dad. For all her flirting, he was her first. Edie, well, she found she liked that side of things. She'd missed out for so long, she took to it with a passion for it, you might say.
Mother did.
When your dad went off to war, well, she got terrible lonely. And there were a lot of soldiers stationed locally.
What are you telling me, Lucy?
She seemed so respectable. Couldn't find no fault with her. Never in a pub nor nothing. But everyone knew. If a soldier came along after 11, all he'd to do was tap on the window.
The clock strikes 11. There's tapping at the window. Sometimes a nail and sometimes a knuckle. Then I'm lifted out of Mother's warm bed. Oh, Lucy. I remember.
You can't, dear. Very careful she was to protect you. Always put you in the spare room, lock the door so you wouldn't see nothing.
But I could hear groaning, like someone was torturing her. Did Dad find out?
He divorced her double quick.
That's when we started to live with you.
Oh, Marnie, dear, I don't want to tell you this.
You can't not.
Before long, it was plain as day your mum was expecting again.
My brother?
Well, she denied it. I think she thought if she denied it, it wouldn't happen. The night it did, she knocked on my door. "Lucy," she said, "I'm very unwell." I went in, and there was you, crying your eyes out. I put you in the spare room, locked the door. Poor Mike, he was trembling and trembling. When the baby came, it was a beautiful little boy. He was perfect. I left Edie to feed him. I was only gone about 20 minutes. When I got back, the baby wasn't there. Edie was in bed, white as a ghost, her hair all ratty.
In tails, like a witch.
Oh, you don't remember, do you? Oh, I always prayed you wouldn't.
I was pressed against the wall, in my nightie. The door handle turned.
Oh, Marnie.
She was holding it out to me. She'd wrapped him in newspaper like he was fish and chips.
Hide it under the bed, Marnie. There's a good girl.
Mother?
This is what happens when you let a man touch you. Blood and muck and pain.
I comes back and says, "Edie, where's the baby?" She says, "What baby? There's no baby."
He was under the bed. I put him under the bed, like she told me.
Dr. Gascoigne came, and they got her stable. But there was no getting round it. She killed that baby. Dr. Gascoigne got her off in court. Said she was suffering from something like purple insanity. It means when women go off their heads sometimes after childbirth. And afterwards, she said the baby died because Dr. Gascoigne messed her up inside. She convinced herself that she was a God-fearing woman who hated all that. She could convince herself of anything once she put her mind to it.
All Mother's life was a lie, then?
I suppose.
Like mother, like daughter.
Oh, you don't mean that.
That money I gave her, for you both to live on, I stole it.
Oh, dear.
I married the man who found me out, but I won't let him touch me. You know what being touched by a man gets you, Lucy? Blood
and muck and pain.
Edie was ill. You know that, don't you?
No. She was rotten, and I'm rotten too. How can you build anything decent on rotten foundations?
All I know is you just have to keep going. It's all any of us can do.
Killing your child and having to live with that. Wanting sex and telling yourself you hate it.
She was trying to protect you, dear.
But she broke me. She wound me up so tight, she broke the mainspring. Mark didn't know what he was taking on. Maybe he isn't trying to control me. Perhaps he really does only want me to be happy.
Let old Lucy give you a hug.
I'm free now. I can do what I want now, go anywhere, free of Mark, the police, Forio, Mother. What the hell do I do?
And that's when something shifted. All at once, I wanted Mark. I wanted to explain, to tell him why I could never have been a normal wife.
Nothing's happened that we can't put right with some courage and some love.
Marion Holland and Molly Jeffrey and Peggy Nicholson were done for. But maybe, just maybe, I thought, there's a chance for Marnie Elmer. If Mark still felt the same. And somehow, I was sure he did. Next day, when we got back from the funeral, Terry Holbrook's car was parked outside.
I heard the SOS on the wireless. I thought with Mark in the hospital he might need some help. I could drive you home, Marnie, if you want.
Oh, that's kind.
I'd like that, Terry. Thanks.
Once again, Terry had come to my rescue when I least expected it. He even came into the house to get me settled when we got back.
You're sure you have everything you need?
You've been very kind, Terry. I'm sorry you and Mark can't get on. I'll try to make it up somehow between you.
Oh, I'm afraid that will be impossible.
Why? Who can that be?
I'll get it, shall I?
Even then, I had no idea. It was only when I saw that all too familiar face walking into my own living room.
Good evening, Mrs. Rutland. Do you remember me? We met at Rex Newton Smith's.
It's Mr. Strutt, isn't it?
I'm glad you remember, Mrs. Rutland. Or should that be Miss Holland? Peggy Nicholson, perhaps? Or Molly Jeffrey? There are a number of us gathered outside waiting to meet those particular young women.
Terry?
I'm sorry. It's you who'll have to pay, Marnie. But Mark has ruined my life. Putting the woman he so clearly adores in prison for a long time, well, how could I resist?
I always thought facing the people I'd stolen from would be the hardest thing of all. But funnily enough, it's the easiest. Whatever happens to me now is going to burn away all the rubbish, all the lies. Anything I come out with the other side will be real. Mark understood that. It's what he tried to make me understand. Whatever I'm left with will be real. That's all that matters now.
In Marnie by Winston Graham, dramatised for radio by Sean McKenna, Marnie was Jade Williams and Mark Patrick Kennedy. Terry was Carl Prekop, Edie Elaine Claxton, and Lucy Joanna Munro. Roman was Brian Bowles, and Dawn Susie Riddell. The director was Marion Nancarrow.